You're listening to ESPN 792.1 FM. Hopefully having a great day. It's sunny. A little bit of a chill, but nothing unseasonable. Nothing that you can't handle. All you Utah football fans who are hoping for good news, who are hoping for clarity on the offensive coordinator situation or on the future of the coaching staff, you are still holding your breath, and I am right there with you. We got a fun show lined up. Gordy Chiesa in half an hour. Jerem Jordan to talk a little red and blue as BYU waits for their bowl appointment. And we'll talk a little bit about how, BYU, I know you don't like hearing this as a Utah fan. BYU actually has a strong case to be considered as an at-large bid in the college football playoff. I don't believe that they are going to be because the disrespect to the Big 12 Conference runs deep and has been very clearly stated by all the rankings that have come out. But if you're actually just zooming out and looking at these resumes blindly, BYU's college football playoff resume is pretty solid, which probably makes it that much more painful for all the Cougar fans that they're not even going to be seriously considered. Jeff Schwartz will join us to talk a little NFL and college football in our third hour of the show. That's at 1 o'clock. So set your calendars accordingly. I told you don't get your hopes up. It's not something I'm happy that I am correct about. But Ben Arbuckle, all reports, all the announcements, will be the next offensive coordinator, not at the University of Utah, but for the Oklahoma Sooners. Utah is a great program, is a nationally relevant program, is a program that will be treated nicely in the preseason rankings next year, but is a program that has had a rough year and is still not yet on the same level from a spending and reputation standpoint as one of the college football blue bloods like the University of Oklahoma. And you could probably make a case that Oklahoma has kind of fallen out of that blue blood status recently. But when you really boil it down, Oklahoma and Utah are not yet on the same tier of achievement and, more importantly, of finance and reputation. And that means that Oklahoma gets their guy. And is he going to make more money at Oklahoma than he did at Utah? Probably. We don't know yet. We don't know what the offer was going to be at the University of Utah. Arbuckle's probably going to make more money there. Now, Utah was close. Falls by the wayside. So now what's next? I put the Twitter poll up. I threw a bunch out there today. Who you think the next play caller is at the University of Utah? All of my hashtag sources have it narrowed down to two names, and both great names. Both names that we talked about weeks ago when putting together a short list, when it became pretty clear that Mike Bajakian was not going to be your long-term answer. You had to start having that conversation in-house and making the phone calls to the coach's agents and things like that. Brennan Marion, UNLV offensive coordinator, Mac Leftwich at Texas State. Those are the two choices that I'm hearing their names from several different people. We saw the recruiting announcement yesterday that a previously committed quarterback who was Bird Ficklin is his name. Bird's the nickname. Jamarian is the first name. Ficklin is now headed to the University of Utah. He was previously committed to Texas State, which, of course, is where Mac Leftwich was coaching. I don't think those things are completely unrelated. It'd be a strong coincidence if it was just that. But Brennan Marion is a guy who knows the region incredibly well, who it follows kind of the natural path of Mountain West to a school like Utah or a school like BYU or a school like Arizona State. Brennan Marion has been recruiting the same types of guys from the same schools at UNLV, and now he would have better opportunity in a power conference. He has managed very well through a quarterback transition in season. That's something I think that was important. It was a big headline earlier in the year that his quarterback walked away because of a dispute over $100,000 between the player and school. Dual threat quarterback with like a 50% completion said, "We're 3-0. I don't care. I'm walking away unless you give me my $100,000." And if I'm Brennan Marion, I'm taking a very careful look at whatever school I end up at. I'm taking a very careful look on not only their NIL funds, but the integrity with which they are distributed, because you don't want to be part of a conversation like that again. And for better or worse, the University of Utah has distributed their funds promptly and as promised. So that might be a reason why Brennan Marion likes the University of Utah. Both of these guys would stand to at least double their salaries, probably more than that, if they came to the U. And the reason they were not quite as front of mind for all of the Utah fans out there is because both of them come without the quarterback attached. That's why Arbuckle was so appealing, because you thought that maybe it meant John Mateer would come to the University of Utah. I don't know if he's going to head to Oklahoma now. I don't know if Mateer is still interested in potentially speaking to the University of Utah. It's all going to depend on what announcement is made. And we're still waiting for not one announcement, but for two from the University of Utah. Is Kyle Whittingham going to be the head coach, and who the offensive coordinator is going to be? And those two things are not unrelated. All conversations coming out of the buildings up there are that the collaborative effort of Morgan Scalley and Kyle Whittingham to hire an offensive coordinator is not – it's collaborative, but it's not two brains that operate as one. Both of these guys have opinions about this stuff. There might be someone who gets along better with Marion, someone who gets along better with Leftwich. There might be more of a desire to hire one from Kyle Whittingham, more of a desire to hire one from Morgan Scalley. They have to come to an agreement on this, and then, of course, they have to come to an agreement with the coach. And you have to do it today.
We're also waiting on a decision from Cam Rising, too.
Well, that one, I don't want that decision.
No.
That decision needs to come after you figure out through the transfer portal and through high school recruiting what your quarterback room looks like. Cam Rising's decision needs to be kind of like Morgan Scalley was head coach in waiting last January officially again, and we didn't really talk about it until the summertime. Mm-hmm. You need that with Cam Rising. Cam Rising probably has already made his decision. Cam Rising has probably already made it clear to the team what's going to happen, and we need to let that be quiet until every quarterback who's even considering committing to the University of Utah either you-know-whats or gets off the pot. That's the only time I want to hear Cam Rising make an announcement, because the fastest thing to chase away a promising young quarterback, a John Mateer type individual, and I don't have my hopes very high that he's really considering Utah at this point, but he's a good example because he's a desirable young player that we expect to be in the transfer portal. The easiest way to chase that guy off is to say, well, one of the all-time greats, upperclassman, is coming back for his 8th year of eligibility, and you're going to be in a quarterback battle. These guys don't want to be in a quarterback battle. If you're a starting quarterback at Washington State, or you're a starting quarterback at North Texas, or you're a starting quarterback at Appalachian State or whatever, you want to be told you're the guy. Barring any disaster, you're the guy. That's why Sam Leavitt went to Arizona State instead of coming to Utah. That's why Sam Leavitt went to Arizona State instead of going to BYU, because Arizona State was in a situation, such a dire situation quarterback-wise, that when Leavitt was considering it, they were like, yeah, you're our guy. Just sign on the dotted line. You're the guy, unless something catastrophic happens. It's a tough place for coaches to be, that you have to make promises that you don't know if it's going to be in the best interest of your team to fulfill. We might have seen a little bit of that with the Isaac Wilson situation this year. A lot of people point to that. I don't know how convinced I am that is the full story, but that's at least part of the story, with the whole Isaac Wilson being the number one backup and then, of course, the replacement starter all year long. We don't know. You said you need a decision on Cam Rising. What about a decision on Isaac Wilson? It's so funny how all of us have just turned the page now, said, we don't really care what happens with that kid. This time last year, people were desperate to hear Isaac Wilson utter the name Utah. People were just scrambling, hoping, please, 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 what a win that will be for this program. Oh, my gosh, we need him. We need him. Well, did you need him? I mean, at the end of the day, you got what you wanted, and then you're ready to now cast that aside instead of putting in the time in the development. We'll see how it works out in the quarterback position, but you're not going to get to know that until you figure out who the offensive coordinator is. And you probably don't get a clear picture on that until we get a clear picture on the future for Kyle Whittingham.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe his decision is based on, can I hire the offensive coordinator that I want? I mean, Coach Witt holds all the cards here. He gets to say, you know what? We're hiring my guy. I like this Brennan Marion cat. I'm going to get him. I like him. I want him. We're going to get him to come to the University of Utah, and he's going to be the offensive play caller. And because of that, I'm optimistic about the future because we signed X number of quarterbacks, and we got this kid out of the transfer portal, looking really, really good for us. Now I want to come back. Or he might say, oof, we're down to our fifth choice now on the offensive coordinator. It's not going all that well. Maybe I'm part of that problem. Maybe it's just a symptom of the situation in college football. In any case, I'm out of here. I don't think that that's how the decision will be made, but he holds all the cards. And I want to see some of those cards played in the next 12 hours because you've got to sign a class starting tomorrow morning. And you're getting the commitments trickling in today. People are flipping like they were yesterday. And that conversation is going to continue throughout the show. As we always open, the opening segment is brought to you by Alvi Armani. All of you out there dealing with hair loss issues, the hair is thinning, the hairline is retreating, you got that bald spot, the little friar tuck developing. Instead of suffering through it, being embarrassed about it, just contact Alvi Armani and tell them OC sent you. The technology now exists for you to have that full flowing head of hair and the confidence that goes with it. Back to the Twitter polls. Arbuckle's off the table. Who do you think is Utah football's offensive coordinator next season? This poll has only been up for about an hour. Right now, 52% of the votes coming in with Brennan Marion, the former UNLV, well, not former yet, the UNLV offensive coordinator. 44% coming in on Mac Leftwich and 4% coming in on other. I said, tell me who on the other, and there's a couple that are coming in that said Matt Wells, maybe. I wouldn't hate that. Dan Mullen. Dan Mullen is doing a great job on TV and getting paid good money to have zero pressure, which is, I think, for coaches, a better outlet. If you could make $1 million plus a year to sit on a set at halftime and analyze everyone else's decisions, that is a lot less stressful of a job than being in charge of 105 knuckleheads that are now, some of them, making money and acting crazy and potentially transferring in or out of your program. If you can get the TV gig, that's what you should do. I don't know if that's appealing to everyone. I do know that that's appealing to Dan Mullen because he's been doing it, and he's been doing it well for a few seasons now. Also, none of this happens in a vacuum, but the Utah State head coaching search is as separate from the Utah offensive coordinator search as two jobs within the same state can be. Because the candidates, the most likely candidates for the Utah State job appear to be Bronco Mendenhall and Jay Hill. Now, 20% of the vote is coming in, almost 20%, 18.7% of the vote is coming in on other, but I said Bronco, Jay Hill, or other, and actually Other is leading over Bronco right now. Jay Hill is running away with this one. I don't know. I just don't know. We'll talk about that a little bit more on the show, maybe with Jerem Jordan. If you're Jay Hill, who established himself as a great head coach at Weber State University, not a good head coach, not a guy who's going to have some success, a great head coach, someone who can take a program and build it, not from a completely bare cupboard, but who can build it into something special, a playoff contender at the FCS level, win recruiting battles, especially here in state. He proved that he can do that for years at Weber State. Had them in the conversation for Big Sky championships every single year, for the FCS college football playoff every single year. Helped develop NFL talent from the FCS level, which is a lot harder than doing it at the Power 4 level or even at the mid-major level, which, of course, is where Utah State fits. That new reconstituted Pac-12 doesn't count as Power 5. But also, Utah State passed over Jay Hill a few years ago. Is he over that? Probably. Different leadership, different athletic director, different everything right now. More importantly, Utah State is a campus and an athletic department that is embroiled in legal battles and controversy and issues that are going to be around for the next 3 to 5 years at least. Do you want to be taking over a new job knowing that at least some of the energy that your bosses have to commit to the athletic department and to the football program is divided and facing backward at the past, at what already happened, at the coaching staff that was fired, at who had to leave? Energy, time, funds, which are a lot harder to come by for Utah State than they are for BYU or Utah right now. Monies are being spent on issues that have nothing to do with the future of your football program moving forward. How appealing is that job for Jay Hill? I just don't know. If it were me, I probably would hold my breath, pause, wait another season, see if I can continue the success I've had with a lot of talented young players on that BYU defense, and see what the coaching carousel looks like next year when it starts spinning. Because one thing we know, death, taxes, and head coaching jobs being available every offseason in college football. These are certainties in life. So that's on the Twitter poll as well, at RealOC Sports, 877-353-0700 if you want to weigh in on the text line as well. Bronco Mendenhall, Jay Hill, or other as the new head coach at Utah State. And then this one we're going to get into. Early signing period opens tomorrow. And you're having to commit not only scholarships now to 18-year-old kids, in some cases 17-year-old kids. You're not only telling them, I'm going to pay for your books, pay for your housing, pay for your academics, pay for your full-ride scholarship. I'm going to welcome you into the culture that I am building and have created here. But now, if it's any recruit that has multiple offers, and let's face it, if you're BYU and you're Utah now, you're only going after guys, for the most part, who have multiple offers. The story of the Alex Smiths and Eric Weddles, who were completely overlooked and underappreciated coming out of high school, are way fewer and further between now for the Utes and for the Cougars than they used to be. Finding the diamond in the rough is harder now than it ever was. And if you do find that diamond in the rough, good for you. He doesn't stay a secret for very long. Right now, Utah is competing with schools that have NIL funds equal to or greater than theirs, that have boosters who are just as passionate or even more so than theirs. They are dealing with situations that are just as stable, or in some cases now, and I can't believe I'm saying it, even more stable than Utah's situation because of the question mark about the head coach. And that means most of the guys that you are recruiting, most of the important guys on your big board, if we want to call it that, are going to come with a price tag as well. Whether that's $10,000 or $200,000 or $250,000, high school recruits now want to know, how much are you going to pay me? NIL opportunities, All right, I want the truck. Is that truck deal going to keep going? Does everyone get a Dodge Ram when I show up at school? And they're going to ask you, how much money do I get? You have to be a 30 to 60-year-old coach now sitting down in front of a 17-year-old, and either politely or just brazenly, they're going to say, yeah, but how much are you going to pay me? It's a new era in college football, and because of that, the landscape has changed so drastically, and these contracts, that's what they are now. These national letters of intent are not just, hey, I want to come be a scholarship recipient at your school. It's I want that plus. I want that and. I want that, but also give me. And I'm not here to talk about the numbers. We've done that plenty. We know that when revenue sharing starts, it's going to be $20 to $22 million that every school gets to distribute across the entire athletic department. And you're going to follow an NFL model with whatever trickles down to the football team, the percentages on how much you give your quarterback, your left tackle, your wide receivers, etc. Tomorrow, you're going to put a bunch of guys on rookie deals. You're going to sign a bunch of high school recruits, and at least half of them are going to have a dollar amount attached to their name. So as you're trying to protect the culture, as you're trying to protect the football brand, as you're trying to protect the team first, the university's reputation, all of these things, you're trying to avoid the situation in the transfer portal and in high school recruiting that UNLV found themselves in, where a quarterback said, you said you give me $100,000, you didn't give it to me, and the school said, no, we gave you what we said we were going to give you. You're actually just holding us over the fire for more. You're trying to avoid a situation like that. What are you putting in the contract to protect your school, to protect your team? I threw some options out there, and of course I left in an other for you to tell me what you would focus on. In the new world of player compensation in college football, what's the most important thing to include in player contracts to protect the team and the culture? Performance-based money, meaning you don't get paid if you don't produce. Injury clauses, meaning the Cam Rising situation is in writing. If you get hurt and you can't play, I'm sorry for you, but we can't give you the max money. We can't give you everything that we decided to, that we promised you. I don't know what happened with Cam Rising's money. I really don't. I don't know if last year when he played 0 games, if he collected every dime that was promised to him. I have no idea. I also don't know if Cam Rising this season, when he was re-signing those NIL deals, if the sponsors, the folks whose money it was, said, well, okay, but we saw what happened last year, so let's put some injury clauses in here. I truly don't know. Privately, behind the scenes, I tried to dig a little bit when we had Cam in studio and ask him about the financials of being a starting quarterback at the University of Utah. It's a little crass. It's a little uncouth to be asking a 25-year-old about his financial future. I did, and he was coy about it, you know? And I respect that. I wouldn't want to be sharing my financial details with strangers either. But do you put injury clauses in? And if you try, are the recruits just going to reject that? Are their parents going to say, what are you talking about? No. If he gets hurt playing for you, you're absolutely still going to pay him because he got hurt playing for you. In the NFL, you still make money if you get put on IR. In the NBA, you still get money. You still get paid if you get hurt. In the NFL, it cuts your money in half depending on the situation with IR and depending on the situation with the ability to continue physically unable to perform, et cetera. What about transfer protection? Are you putting a transfer protection clause in there? Hey, we'll give you $100,000, but I'm not going to give you the full $100,000 until you start year number 2 with us. Again, can you even put any of this stuff in there? Can you put these qualifiers in and still hope to sign the high priority targets? Or do kids have so many options these days that at least a couple of those are not going to have the red tape, and Texas is going to say, yeah, well, it'll suck for us if we lose the $1 million we promised you, but we can afford it. So, come on. There's no performance-based money here. There's no injury clause here. There's no transfer protection for our university here. Just sign the deal and come be our 4-star, 5-star commit. What are you putting in those contracts? 877-353-0700 to protect your team. You have to think about all of this in the modern era of college football, and that is crazy to me. I'll say this. If I was in charge of luring a talented player, a quarterback out of the transfer portal would be my number one, obviously. I was trying to get a running back depth to the room, which I think Utah's going to have to do this year. Yes, I'm telling them we're going to get you a car. I'm not going to give them the truck that everyone else is driving, though. I'm going to say, you're special. I'm hooking you up with an Ineos Grenadier. And there's a chance they're like, wait, what is that? Well, go look it up, WarnerIneosGrenadier.com. You've seen the Super Bowl ads starting last year. That's really where I was turned on to this vehicle. They ran the Super Bowl ads, and that was my response. Whoa, what is that thing? And that is the response when you drive it around the streets. People stop, they roll down the window at the stoplight or at the stop sign, and they say, hey, what is that? How long have you had that? Where did you get that? Warner Ineos Grenadier, 2400 South, 5600 West. It's a beautiful car aesthetically, but the performance is what really matters, especially as the weather starts to turn here in Utah. This thing is full-time four-wheel drive, available locking differentials. It is overbuilt, meaning what it's capable of far exceeds what you're probably going to use it for. Chances are you'll take it up the hill, you'll go skiing on some slippery roads, right? You'll take it to the school and to the grocery shopping, and you might even road trip with it. But what you really should do is head down to Moab and test this bad boy out on the Red Rocks. I'm telling you, the performance of the Ineos Grenadier is really what sets it apart from all the other SUVs and luxury SUVs out there. The look, top-notch. The performance, top-notch. And they have stripped away all of the unnecessary bells and whistles that don't really make sense to have in a sport utility vehicle. On top of that, the accessories package, the add-ons are limitless. You want that rooftop tent, they've got that for you. You want to hang the gas cans and the water cans for the emergency situations off the side of the vehicle, they've got the full rail storage system for all of that. The opportunities are endless. Turn this vehicle into what you want. Ineos Grenadier out at the Warner dealership, 2400 South, 5600 West. Tell them OC sent you. Tell them you want to take it, not just for a short little test drive. You want to take it overnight. Tell them I said they would allow you to do that. Test this bad boy out. Ineos Grenadier, WarnerIneosGrenadier.com. Check it out. All right, Gordy Chiesa is going to join us next. We'll talk a little Utah Jazz basketball. Lauri Markkanen coming back off an injury and doesn't look any worse for the wear. But is that sustainable with the lone star player on this Utah Jazz roster? Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 792.1 FM, part of the Utah ESPN Radio Network.
Sexton drives on LeBron, found a seam inside. Walker Kessler put it.
Keep the votes coming in on the Twitter polls at Real OC Sports. 877-353-0700 is our text line, brought to you by the Dish Pros. And, of course, the show is always brought to you by Les Schwab. Les Schwab Tires has all of the wheels, the accessories, and, of course, the tires you need for whatever you drive. Stop by the local Les Schwab today. Their professionals will get the job done right the first time. This time of year, make sure there's enough tread on those tires, ladies and gentlemen, all right? I've been guilty of driving around on baldies in the past. You don't want to be doing that when the snow and ice starts to hit. Les Schwab. Gordy's going to stop by. Gordy Chiesa, our NBA expert, is going to stop by momentarily here. Talk about what's going on with Utah Jazz. Talk about the NBA at large. The Jazz are in a situation right now. As a fan, you got to love some of these young players, but you also have to remind yourself that every time you win, as a natural sports fan, you're like, yay, winning. But wait, not too much so. And it's just, I know we say it every time we talk about the Jazz, but it is a complicated and backward place for fans to be in. Anyway, Gordy Chiesa stops by. Gordy, how are you?
Sean, I'm doing well, and that's exactly right for the Jazz fans. It's an interesting dilemma they have. I'm going to call this a year so far, Sean, a gap year, where the Jazz are taking a gap as far as being highly competitive for the short term, for the long-term picture of getting a high draft pick and also building for the future.
So when you're in that situation and, a game like the other night where you got someone who hits a shot goes in, potentially the game winner. Oh, but wait, we called the timeout. We snatched that field goal away from you. And, ultimately you end up losing the game. But while you lose the game, you prove in a weird way that you also could have won that game, I suppose. Is that like the ideal scenario for a team that's in this situation?
Yeah, very much. Yeah, during that course of that game, you're competitive, and the Jazz did a good job. Will Hardy called timeout. He did it early, so it wasn't like late, and obviously it was so loud that Colin Sexton couldn't hear him. And you saw Anthony Davis was in the lane when he heard the whistle. He didn't try to block the shot. Maybe he blocks it, maybe he doesn't. So it was the right call with a young team. Usually speaking, you wouldn't call timeout with a veteran team, but with a younger team, you would. It was the right thing to do. Unfortunately, Jazz didn't win, and that was a dilemma right now. Jazz right now 4-16, 2-9 at home, and 2-7 on the road. And just for a reference point, the Jazz were 10-31 on the road last year. So right now they're 2-7, and they play tonight against the Thunder. So they have to try to get some wins on the road, which is a tough dilemma. Again, do you want to win or you don't want to win? The players want to win, so do the coaches. But in the big picture, the draft supersedes winning at all costs right now.
I was out, so I didn't get a chance to talk to you about the Lauri Markkanen injury situation, and obviously it didn't prove to be very serious, but when you see something like that unfold, especially kind of a knee-to-knee thing, what's the reaction in the short term, and then how do you evaluate it as the guy gets back to practice and things?
Yeah, I knew it was knee-to-knee, so thank God it wasn't structural yet. So it was he's able to play some, but from a coaching standpoint and a medical standpoint, you're glad it wasn't just as far as it was more of a contusion. That's what they call it. So he's able to play right now, and you always think the worst. However, the Jazz got a good situation with him. He's able to perform right now. But the Jazz are banged up, though. And again, this time of year, Sean, everybody's sort of banged up. And so the Jazz are playing without Filipowski. They're playing without Jordan Clarkson. And obviously, they're playing without Taylor Hendricks. So those guys aren't playing. With that said, though, it's an opportunity for other guys to play. And that's why it's so important when the coach calls your name that you're able to go in there and play right away. From the Thunder point of view, like for tonight, Alex Cruz is out, who we all love. He's out with a hip injury. Chet Holmgren, you can make a discussion point, is an all-star in the future. He'll come back probably around February 7th. He has that right pelvis fracture. Ousmane Dieng is a good young player, Frenchman. He's got a fractured finger right now. And Jalen Williams, the other Williams on the Thunder, hasn't played a minute this year yet. And so, again, the Thunder are an interesting team because they're in first place with a lot of injuries also.
What does it tell you about a team when they can, I guess, survive that sort of injury attrition but still perform well? In the NFL, my San Francisco 49ers, Gordy, are banged up and they're a mash unit, and the record reflects that. But the Detroit Lions are the best team in the NFC right now, record-wise, and I think when you actually watch them. And they've also had a bunch of injuries, so you could explain away any losses that they have, but they haven't. They've continued to win, where my Niners, who were a Super Bowl favorite coming in, have looked awful because of the injuries. And now Oklahoma City, another example of this, they've been banged up, but like you said, still in first place. And
the reason why is their quality depth. And that also, usually speaking, when you're injured, there's less of a playbook where you cut back the playbook as far as the different other sets and plays, and you keep it more even simplified, so that the guys that are getting more minutes as far as playing, they're playing more with athletic freedom versus trying to execute all the time. And so, with that said, though, the main guys here, though, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, first-team All-NBA, he's played the whole season. He has been absolutely terrific. He's an MVP candidate right now, and he's the main focal point for them. And his kid named Jalen Williams from Santa Clara has been tremendous also. They also got back Isaiah Hartenstein, who was hurt to start the season. So Hungren goes down. They made their free agent signing last summer for Hartenstein, and he's come through for them as a center. He's averaging 15.2 points per game, 13.8 rebounds, and 3.8 assists. So the main guy is still there, really is leading the way, but his supported sidekicks have come through also. They have a great system. And in jazz basketball, Sean, that's what they're trying to do, build through the draft. So most of the players on the Thunder, minus the main guy, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, they drafted. That was the trade for Paul George. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander played 1 year for the Clippers. The Clippers traded young him to the Thunder. The Thunder traded Paul George to the Clippers. It's worked out tremendously for the Thunder.
Gordy Chiesa, our resident NBA insider, my guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking about the Western Conference right now of NBA basketball. The Jazz will take on Oklahoma City tonight. Over in the East, Cleveland still at the top of things, Boston nipping at their heels, but the Orlando Magic are one of the hottest teams in the NBA. When you look at the East and you talk about true contenders there, plenty of basketball left to play, but how many teams are in the mix, in your opinion, to potentially be in that Eastern Conference final when we get there?
There just should be five. Besides the Cavs, Celtics, Magic, Knicks, and Bucks. Those are the five that you can make a narrative where if things fall into place. Because all those teams play good defense. You know, with the Orlando Magic, they're the only team left in the NBA that's undefeated at home. They're 9-0. And so they've done a tremendous job. And their best player, Apollo Banchero, is injured. And so they're doing it by old-school, rock-solid defense and protecting the ball. Because they're not really an elite three-point shooting team. But what they do is that they guard, they rebound, and they have enough playmakers and shot takers to finish in the lane. So they score really off movement. And they've been a fun story. So those five teams, the Bucks have won 6 in a row, Magic 6 in a row, and they've really come alive the last few weeks or so. Big game tonight in the Garden tonight. It's on TNT. The Knickerbockers host the Magic. And so that will tell us more about both teams where they are.
This one has nothing to do with the Eastern Conference, but it's one of those interesting milestones that when I see it happen in sport, I'm like, okay, how meaningful is that? At the end of the day, you know, when we're talking about this particular stat, 10 years from now? Does it hold up? Is it now commonplace? Steph Curry and James Harden are now the only two guys that have made 3,000 three-pointers in their career. Curry obviously did it first. James Harden just joined him. With the way that the game has changed and the prevalence and the rise of the three-point shot, when we're talking about this in 10 years, is this still going to be an impressive stat, or will it be a lot more commonplace because of the way that the game has shifted?
It'll be more commonplace, yes. That the three-point shot is absolutely the main focal point of the regular season. So the answer is yes. 10 years from now, there'll be many people, career-wise, will make over 3,000 three-point shots. Sean, however, just like in the NFL, defense rules and ball control security rules. So it's so interesting. What most teams do erratic is that they have a love fest during the regular season of making three-point shots, but in the playoffs, it's the opposite. The shot of a choice is mid-range and taking the ball to the basket. And the reason why, the defense schematically is so sound that they're never leaving the three-point shooters by themselves. They're always guarding them. And so the shot of a choice is more interior versus exterior. So it's interesting. So the ability for teams to play playoff basketball in the regular season, so there's no transition when they get to the postseason. Usually speaking, those teams win. Now here's the outlier. Of course, there's always an outlier. Last year was the Celtics. Last year the Celtics had the most three-point shots in the NBA, and they made them, and they made them also in the postseason. But generally speaking, it's the opposite.
So in other pro leagues, we see rules changed. We see things happen, and we're going to talk about something baseball is proposing here in about, 5 or 10 minutes that 10 years ago, 20 years ago would have sounded insane, that to a purist might sound insane. We've seen the NFL become more of a passing league, and rules have been changed to protect quarterbacks, either to preserve that or maybe that's why it became more of a passing league. In the NBA, if the three-pointer becomes so commonplace, are we going to establish a four-point shot? Is basketball going to have to continue to adapt to the changes, especially the changes regarding the three-point shot?
Yes, the answer is yes. We will see eventually a four-point shot. Yeah, very much. The evolution of it. I'm all for it.
You like that?
Just increase the range.
Because you're an old-school guy, Gordy. That it doesn't bother you that we've now altered the purity of the game, and suddenly with four-point shots available, now all the old guys, the dudes in the record books that did it the way that Wilt Chamberlain did it, and did it the way that Karl Malone did it, those guys are going to eventually get passed up, presumably, by people who can make four-point shots. I
know, and that's sports where. Sean, just very similar to passing. If a guy threw 20 touchdown passes in the season back in 85, but minus Dan Marino, that guy was really good. Now everybody throws 42 touchdown passes, and that's the evolution of the game. However, I mentioned earlier, I'll be redundant one more time about it, but in playoffs, though, everything changes. Ball control. In football, having a running game. The game is won at the line of scrimmage. In basketball, the game is won on the boards. Who has turnovers? Less turnovers. And so that will never change, because when you get to a finish line, meaning the playoffs, in the postseason, the players know that the ball is everything. Who has the ball as far as making plays and preventing plays, usually the chances of winning are dramatically greater. That's why it's so important. So, Sean, like tonight's game, for the Jazz fans that are going to watch and listen, is that the Thunder are first in the NBA in least turnovers committed at only 11 per game. Good for them. So they really secure the ball and take care of it, decision-making. The flip side, unfortunately, for the Jazz point of view, they commit the most turnovers in the NBA, number 30, at 16.9. And so, again, as the Jazz go forward, they've got to learn how to and emphasize more and have accountability of protecting the ball and also trying to create turnovers. So that's how you win. It involves a ball, and whenever the ball is advantageous to your side, the chances of winning are much greater.
All right, Gordy, before I cut you loose, what list do you have for me today?
Okay, the list today is about shot blocking because we know that's such a big part of the game as far as rim protecting. And Walker Kessler, through all this chaos as far as the early season, but the first 20 games, he's played very well for the Jazz. He struggled last year, his sophomore year. Now his third season in the NBA, he's really done a wonderful job. Just quickly, he's averaging 2.9 blocks per game, which puts him second in the NBA behind Victor Wembanyama, who's averaging 3.5 blocks a game. All right, here we go. Here's the list. The Utah Jazz franchise leaders in total block shots wearing a Jazz uniform. So career block shots in Jazz basketball. Quickly, what are some of shot blockers' attributes? 1, positioning. 2, timing. 3, length. 4, body avoidance. In other words, being the second jumper on a head and shoulder fake. And 5, technique. Technique is everything. Touch blocks keep the ball in play versus smashing blocks. Ball goes out of bounds. It's the shooting team's ball again. Here we go. Top 10. Rich Kelly had 498 blocks for the Jazz. He played also for the New Orleans Jazz and the Utah Jazz. Number 9 all-time, Ben Poquet had 517. Number 8, vastly underrated, Paul Millsap had 520 career blocks. Number 7, Derek Favors had 840 blocks. Thurl Bailey, Big T, our colleague, had 879 blocks. Number 5 all-time, Karl Malone, 1,125 career blocks. Number 4, Greg Ostertag, 1,253. Number 3, the Stifle Tower, Rudy Gobert, had 1,357 career blocks. Number 2, the Jazz-owned Russian Comet, Andrei Karolinko, as a wingman, had 1,380 blocks, which comes to 2 per game. And the number 1 leader in Utah Jazz franchise history, I used to call him the master of the head game blocks, was Mark Eaton. Mark had 3,064 career blocks, which comes to 3.5 blocks per game for an average. And what made Mark Eaton such an unbelievable shot blocker, remember, he's left-handed, so he blocks shots with his southpaw, with his left hand. And so when righty shooters would come across, his natural hand was right there ready on the ball, and he mastered the art form of being the second jumper. Last point, Walker Kessler. This is 3rd year in the NBA. He has total blocks right now, 367, which comes to career 2.4 blocks per game. Eventually, soon, he'll be in the top 10.
Wow. Those attributes you talked about that factor into being a great shot blocker, how many of them are coachable? Obviously, length you can't coach up. The timing thing, it feels like some guys have the instincts, some don't. I go back to when, on The Last Dance, Dennis Rodman was talking about, his ability to kind of read a rebound before it came off the rim. Some guys have it, some don't. So how many of those shot blocker attributes are very coachable in your mind?
The first one, positioning. In other words, being early help, like any sport. The ability to go from point A to point B, and we call it early help. So position-wise, be there early. There's a 4th one we talked about. 2 was timing, 3 was length. 4th, body avoidance. That's when you have to have discipline. Be the second jumper on a head and shoulder fake. It could be out in perimeter. It could be in the lane. So when the guy gives you a fake, whether it's a shoulder fake or a head fake, you have to have discipline and jump second versus first. And so we do drills about staying, we call it stay up, stay down. And then the last point about it is touch technique. Don't smash the ball out of bounds. Just try to deflect the shot. We call it a touch block to ignite the fast break. So these are all things that you can teach. Yeah, I agree with you that it's innate, but also you could help players do that. Shot blocking is absolutely critical. And this is, by the way, the number 1 shot blocker in the history of basketball is Akeem Olajuwon.
Akeem the Dream. He was smooth with everything he did.
Absolutely. And remember, he was a soccer player, so he didn't play basketball till roughly, we'll say, teenage years. And so most people from Europe or Nigeria, from the Dark Continent, or from South America, that they grew up around soccer, and so they're much more fluid as far as their footwork. And they change sports. Then their footwork is always superior, and that's so Olajuwon. That was part of it. In other words, he mastered positioning, timing, length, body avoidance, and not smashing blocks but touch blocks.
Gordy, you're the man. Always appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Peace out. Bye now.
All right, I alluded to this when we were talking with Gordy Chiesa. Major League Baseball is considering another rule change. You're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. I'll tell you what it is next. Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 792.1 FM. Discussion in about 5 minutes on the Sean O'Connell Show. Real quick, the Hot Lunch brought to you by Lemon Shark Poke right here on 300 South in downtown Salt Lake City, just east of our Broadway studios in the ground floor of the Judge Building. Delicious, well-sourced fish, fresh produce, locally sourced as often as they can. Go get the OC Bowl and tell them that OC sent you at Lemon Shark Poke. Rule changes are coming in baseball. Baseball is trying to appeal to a younger audience. We've talked about the pitch clock. Minor league baseball, they tested out the umpire review on balls and strikes. I thought I was going to hate it, and then I went to a couple of Bees games at Smith's Ballpark this year, and batters were able to challenge the strike and ball calls. They used the electronic umpire basically to get it right or wrong, and they did it quickly and it moved on, and I was like, all right, that's something that could fit in Major League Baseball. Well, this is new, but it's interesting, and I for one kind of love it. I don't know if everyone is going to feel the same way. Rob Manfred, the commissioner of baseball, has admitted, that might be the wrong word for it, but he has confirmed that a golden at-bat rule is being bandied about, being talked about among owners and the competition committee in Major League Baseball. And what this would amount to is once per game, a team would be allowed to pull out the trump card, find a situation where their best hitter is needed regardless of where you're at in the lineup, okay? So presumably you would save this until the end of a game. Maybe you'd see a situation where an opposing pitcher was starting to wear down. Maybe you've got runners in scoring position. Maybe it's bases loaded. And you say, all right, we're going to use our golden at-bat, and Aaron Judge is going to come up right now. No, Aaron Judge isn't up for 6 more batters. Ha-ha, doesn't matter. Golden at-bat, we can put him at the plate right now. I kind of love this.
I kind of do too. And it's like when we see this get tested out in the minors too with the Bees and everybody else, like it's going to be a game changer, and like the pitch clock is a game changer.
How awesome would it be, right? If your favorite team, you're just like, oh my gosh, we're down 1, we're heading into the bottom of the 9th, and we got the dregs of our batting lineup coming up. We got 7, 8, 9 coming up, but the skipper hasn't used the golden at bat yet, and he says, no, I need someone on base. I'm putting my leadoff hitter up right now. And look, they still have to iron out the details because technically you could have a situation where, you decide that Aaron Judge is batting twice in a row, or Shohei Ohtani is up to knock in the runners in scoring position, and he just comes to the plate 1 batter early, and then he's up next. So you got a pinch run for him or something, but you already do that in baseball. Yeah. So I love this as an idea. To only be able to do it 1 time per game, and think of all the discussion for fans, for media, for opposing managers, for pitchers, how to manage stuff like this. Well, hey, you know what? They haven't used their golden at bat yet, so we got to be really careful through this part of the lineup. Or if they used it early, if they wasted it early, hey, you're safe now because the golden at bat is off the table. I hope this comes to fruition in professional baseball. I hope we see it in the majors. First, we will see it in the minors, and I will be there for it at a Bees game. Unfortunately, not at Smith's Ballpark because they're moving down to daybreak. But I like this idea, and I like the idea of doing it in other sports also.
I'd agree. Who even is your baseball team, by the way?
The Twins. I grew up from 0 to 9 years old. I lived in Minnesota. I went to a lot of Twins games, so I've just kind of held on to that. I'm not the biggest baseball guy in the world, but I do enjoy baseball postseason, and unfortunately my Twins have not been a factor in the postseason. Not a real one.
My Giants haven't been either, trust me.
All right, we got to take a quick one. That's the Hot Lunch brought to you by Lemon Shark Poke, a golden at-bat rule being debated in Major League Baseball. I would love it. I would also like it in NBA basketball if you could do a golden free throw where every once in a while you bring up a guy, oh my gosh, they sent Joel Embiid to the line. They sent Shaq to the line in a crucial point of the game. Have Jeff Hornacek shoot his free throws for him. That would be amazing.
That would be amazing, especially like a 1-point game too. You're just like, oh, cool, I'll tie it up.
But when would you use it? Oh my gosh, you'd have to wait till the very end.
Yeah.
All right. Jerem Jordan joins us next. Is Jay Hill going to be coaching the BYU defense next year, or is he on his way out for a head coaching opportunity? We'll discuss that and much more as BYU waits for their bowl bid. Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, part of the Broadway Sports Media Network.
certainly affects everybody when there's a coaching change at either school, and what that looks like and how quickly that goes. And is Kyle going to go after it one more time or not? He's had an amazing career at Utah. And, I think BYU fans are interested in that happens. Cam Rising coming back or not? Who's the OC? What's going on? It's all tis the season, is it not, for transfer portal and coaches?
When it happens, it's not an if, it's a when it happens. When Morgan Scalley takes over the head coaching position at the University of Utah, how many guys currently on the BYU staff are targets for him to add back to Utah staff, do you think?
That's a good question, because these guys have flip-flopped a few, alums at either school or whatever. But, yeah, it'd be interesting, because the way that Jay Hill and his defense performed this year, certainly he's a notable candidate for a bunch of positions and whatnot. And Chris Burgess is like the poster child for, like, wait, what, you can go away from your alma mater to the other school after being that? Like, is Chris Burgess like a candidate as the next guy whenever that job opens up? And who knows, right? Like, there's a lot of questions unanswered, but that's the fun that we have on talk shows, isn't it?
Let's talk a little bit more about Jay Hill. His name has come up in connection with the Utah State head coaching vacancy, and apparently they've gone pretty far down the road, at least in terms of discussions. What are you hearing? What are you feeling about Jay Hill potentially taking a Utah State job?
Jay would crush it wherever he goes next. However, I feel like he's probably going to stay at BYU. That's my sense right now. We had Blaine Fowler on BYU Sports Nation today, and he was of the opinion that if Jay went to Utah State, he would want certain things that probably couldn't happen right now in terms of facilities and certain upgrades and whatnot. That was Blaine's opinion. I think Jay is building something special here. I also wonder from a health perspective, like what he's good to do. He was in such a position of kind of taking it easy that, Sean, he wouldn't even go down at halftime to the locker room. He would just stay in the press box. That's the kind of sort of take it easy situation physically he was in. So I don't know what that means for him, whether, you're good to be a head coach and stand on the sideline all the time. It's going to be several months after the heart attack and whatnot, but Jay's been amazing. I think he's been the MVP of BYU season in terms of how he turned that defense around, and 20 picks, tops in the country from 12 different dudes. Like, that's amazing. And this BYU defense certainly helped the offense out quite a bit, and they played complementary football with some great special teams where BYU scored, punt return touchdown, 3 kickoff return touchdowns, obviously some clutch kicks, 54-yarder from Will Farron of the long this year. So, I'm interested to see what happens. Certainly it'd be awesome to keep him at BYU because he's been amazing.
Shout out to Blaine Fowler, by the way, who you just mentioned. I ran into him on Sunday, and we had a lot of those same conversations. Love that guy. Just an absolutely –
Blaine's great.
He's great.
Blaine can quote poetry, Dr. Seuss, play the piano, sing. Like, he's like the most well-rounded, talented person I've ever met in my life.
That's pretty amazing. So further down the road of this conversation, like is Utah State – clearly the BYU defensive coordinator job is a good job, right? You get paid well. You get a little more free time on Sundays than most coaches get. You've got good players down there right now. I think a very talented roster returning. That is a very good job, and I could see why it's appealing right now for Jay Hill, and not just right now, but I would love to work for Kalani Sitake. He's amazing as a human being and as a coach. Is the Utah State job a good job? If you take Jay Hill's name out of it, is it a good job right now, given the backdrop of everything that's happened in that athletic department and with the football program specifically? It's a complicated time in Logan.
Yeah, and there have been times where it's not been complicated and it's been awesome, right? We've seen what Gary Anderson and Blake Anderson have done up there, and they've done great jobs, and it's been great. His name escapes me, but the Texas, he went to Texas Tech, and then now he's at Kansas State.
Matt Wells?
My tongue, but Matt Wells, thank you. That job has been a good job at times. Right now, certainly it's a little rockier. That soil's a little harder to till. But, if Bronco Mendenhall hadn't been at New Mexico, that would have been like a guy that felt like up for that situation, but he's doing a similar job at New Mexico in terms of like, all right, we got to get this thing kick-started. So, yeah, I'm interested to see who the next person is there. I would think kind of taking year 3 at BYU for Jay Hill is like we talked about, a much kind of smoother situation. And so let's see who ends up there. I'm intrigued, but I thought a week ago that Jay was a pretty good candidate. I was hearing they were down the road with him, but what I've been told recently is that it's probably not going to be Jay Hill.
Jerem Jordan, my guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking BYU football, I guess even a little Utah State football, since we had a conversation about Jay Hill there. Look, the transfer portal is open in a week, and already people are starting to throw their names in there. Got a couple announcements from BYU players who've decided that now is the right time to move on from that Kalani Sitake coach program. I don't love the timing of this transfer portal window before bowl games. You know, you want to see guys at least finish it out with their teams, but that's a big picture thing. I don't have any control over that. The guys who already put their name in, already announced their intention to put their name in, who's the biggest loss for BYU?
Yeah, there's a couple names. Miles Davis at running back didn't play a ton this year. Micah Harper didn't play a ton this year, coming off an ACL, and there was some good depth at that position. The one that Cody Epps, certainly 2 years ago in 22, he had 100-yard games against Notre Dame and Arkansas as a redshirt freshman. He was awesome. But he kind of hasn't been the same since. He put his name in the portal a couple years ago, and then he's kind of been banged up. So those 3 guys didn't play a ton, so it's not like a notable loss in terms of production on the field. But Jackson Bowers, the tight end who put his name in, that was tough because he was an ESPN top 300 guy. And BYU's losing some starters there. Keanu Hill, Matava Tyus, they are graduating. Reiner Swanson was a very talented, highly recruited 4-star tight end out of Southern California who was in the mix this year. He's going on a mission to Africa. So it seems like Jackson Bowers is going to step in with Ethan Erickson, be in the mix there, but that's a loss. However, BYU hasn't been using the tight end at a super high level in terms of targets and whatnot. So, it hadn't played a ton, but was certainly looking forward to him playing, and now he's off to other pastures.
All right, focusing more in on what's still to come in this season for BYU. They've got a bowl game, and what I'm hearing is that the Alamo Bowl is a likely candidate. There's a bunch of different bowls that are very interested in the Cougs for obvious reasons. They travel well. Even if the fans don't travel, they show up in their royal blue because, the church community in whatever state. What are you hearing on the most likely bowl destination?
Behind me in the press box on Saturday were the Alamo and Pop-Tart Bowls. So I would assume it's those two. I didn't see anybody from other bowls, although 2 games before that, it was Rose and Sugar. So, how the turns table, as Michael Scott once said. I was like, their jackets were much nicer than yours. No, Pop-Tart or Alamo would be cool. It depends if you want an edible mascot or not. But I'm intrigued because some of the projections for bowl opponent are pretty interesting. Like if BYU did line up with Colorado, and people are like, wait a minute, they're in the Big 12. The teams that were in the Pac-12 have separate Pac-12 designated bowl games versus the ones that were already in the Big 12. So they could match up, and they didn't play each other this year. So that actually could be interesting. Dion said that Shedeur and Travis aren't opting out, which I don't believe, actually. I don't believe they're actually going to play in the bowl game, even though he said they are.
I think that I think that his influence and power might find its limit with a situation like that. I think,
why would they play in the game? That'd be so weird.
I think that
it's not a playoff game. Why are you playing in that game?
Yeah, I think that I understand. I appreciate the sentiment from Coach Prime and saying no, we're going to finish it out. That's great. Those 2 guys are both staring down the barrel of $25+ million signing bonuses as first-round draft picks. So, no, I don't think that the Pop-Tarts Bowl is going to be appealing enough.
No. Seeing other projections that have Clemson potentially, Washington State, which is not as interesting to me. But, what do you want out of a bowl game is the question I always ask our fan base every year. It's like, do you want opponent? Do you want location? Do you want the bowl game itself? The prestige of that or whatever. Before, as an independent for BYU, it was a lot of fans wanted a certain amount of money associated with the bowl, which is funny to me because it doesn't go to them, it goes to the school. Now they're in the Big 12, it all gets shared, so that's not a thing. It's do you just want a good matchup? what I really want is just a win. I don't actually care about who the team is. I want BYU to get to an 11th win, finish in the top 15, and then you carry that momentum into next year. That's pretty awesome.
The 10-2 finish, but finding out at halftime of your final game that you're not going to win the tiebreaker and you're not going to get to participate in a Big 12 championship game. Seems like it was kind of hard for players, fans, and maybe even these coaches to digest, understandably so. But you were there, and so what was that process like on actual game day of keeping one eye on what happens with Iowa State and obviously needing to take care of business against a Houston team that is not as good as BYU, but certainly can be threatening?
For the fans, it was the highest level of apathy I've ever felt in that stadium, where it was just like, meh, like, what now? And you could see it. BYU came out super flat in that third quarter. They kind of woke up in the fourth. But, yeah, super disappointing because it wasn't just that, Kansas State didn't help BYU out. It was BYU was sitting at 9-0 and saw their name on the 3-seed line on a Tuesday night a couple weeks ago. And it was completely in BYU's control to beat Kansas at home, even with all the issues. They still had the ball at the 15 with 2 minutes left, 1st and 10. Arizona State, you go down 21-0, you fight back, you've got the ball with under 2 minutes to go to try and clinch a Big 12 title appearance. But a couple thoughts. One is, I think BYU was very fortunate, clutch, lucky, call it what you want. It's kind of a preparation meant opportunity to BYU's credit. They very easily at 9-0 could have been 7-2 or 6-3. Utah fans know what I'm talking about. But like Oklahoma State, and you still have to drive down against Utah and get the field goal even after the holding on 4th and 10. Baylor, you intercept a pass in a 6-point game as Baylor's marching. Like BYU made some great plays to their credit to be 9-0. But then the ball doesn't bounce your way a couple times, and you kind of regress to probably the mean there. It was the fact that BYU got to 10-2 in the regular season is incredible. I think if you played this season out like 1,000 times, it was probably like 8-4, 7-5 in some spaces, right? 9-3 to get to 10-2. Well, I think the coaching staff did an incredible job with this group that doesn't have a superstar. They have a bunch of good to very good players. There's not a top 3 rounds NFL guy on this team as of now in next year's draft. I think that's all to BYU's credit that they were able to get 10 wins with this group, a chance for 11. They should be credited with that. And obviously disappointing not to get one more win. You like how many good bounces can go our way? They almost went BYU's way against Kansas and Arizona State. So feeling good about the season, certainly disappointed with the fact that BYU doesn't at least get the Big 12 title opportunity. But you can't, like, when you lose, Sean, it matters. You can't lose 2 of the last 3 and be like, we belong, we deserve to be in this. BYU's not saying that, but if they have been like 6-1 and then 8-2 and then come in with a couple more wins, it's just a different sort of momentum into this moment.
I know that BYU's not saying, hey, we should be somewhere that we're not. I am happy to take that load because this time of year when it was a 4-team playoff, I always had a problem with the biases that exist in college football. And in the 12-team playoff, those biases are even more obvious because the SEC can do no wrong and is going to get 5 teams in, and the Big 12 is going to get 1, the eventual champion only, and they're probably not even going to get the first round bye. Whatever. You look at, and I understand you made all of your points about, the fact that, maybe things could have played out differently for BYU. They're well made. But this is a 10-2 team with the only win of the season over top 10 SMU. Nobody else was able to beat SMU, who might end up being, a conference champion and get a first-round bye. And BYU's resume, their strength of record, all that stuff, the health of the team, which unfortunately does matter in the College Football Playoff Committee's mind. Like, you could make a relatively easy case, in my viewpoint, even as an alum of the rival school and a host on the rival school's radio network, that BYU deserves at least to be in the conversation for an at-large bid. I know it's not going to happen, but if we're going to have this expanded college football playoff that was supposed to promise more access to the folks that didn't previously have a lot of access, this is the kind of year and the kind of resume and the kind of a down year, in my opinion, from the SEC that should open up an opportunity for a special BYU team to potentially at least get a nod.
Yeah, I wish that the committee would at least have BYU sort of on the bubble. I think they're off the bubble, if you will.
I agree, and I don't think they should be.
I don't think they should be in firmly, but I think they should be like the third or fourth team out, maybe second. But they're not going to be in that conversation. I think when BYU lost affected a lot of this, and BYU's got some great things going for them, like you mentioned. They've got a top 10 win. They had 2 top 25 wins for many weeks. They're not going to tonight because Kansas State's going to drop out. Their only losses to Kansas was 5-7, but everyone knows Kansas got really good because they beat Iowa State and Colorado and BYU in consecutive weeks, the only unranked team to beat 3 ranked teams in a row ever. So BYU has had a tremendous season, but unfortunately not going to be in that conversation. I wonder at some point if they did expand the 16-team playoff. Now tonight we're like, oh, is BYU in? They probably should be in. It's a fun conversation, but what the committee has done this year has been like, we don't really care how hard your schedule is that much. Like, you can be Indiana, play nobody, don't compete with Ohio State, you're in the playoff. And it's funny because I wonder, like, if BYU was independent and had played a lesser schedule and only lost 1 game here, they'd be in right now. But they're in the Big 12. They went 10-2, and it feels like it didn't benefit BYU from a scheduling standpoint. Which is pretty disappointing. Obviously, you want to be in the Big 12. Big 12's fantastic for BYU. The TV money that's going to be full share next year, and you're in the conversation. You have conference context, all this stuff. But I'm like, wait, is it that much better from a competitive scheduling standpoint than if they were independent? It's kind of a weird thought to have right now.
Last thing before I let you go, the timing of the losses, I agree, did hurt. And Jake Retzlaff had a wonderful year at BYU, but later in the year, you saw some of the things that were issues for him last season. Some of the decision-making, that gunslinger mentality, a ball doesn't bounce your way, or a defensive back doesn't drop an interception in these later games that maybe was dropped in the earlier games that you were able to win. Shows some of the warts on a really good player. Did the luster come off of Jake in these final 3 games for BYU?
Certainly didn't play his best against Houston. 8 of 19 for 167, not great. 116 on the rating. I think at times, Jake's been great. That was probably his low point. So perhaps easy to pile on right after. But I thought he had a good year. This wasn't a year where BYU said, "Hey, Jake Retzlaff, you got to win us games." This has been a great team effort, complementary football from all 3 phases. I think BYU is one of the most well-rounded teams in the country. They're not. You could argue they have elite special teams, given how many touchdowns, 4 special teams touchdowns this year and whatnot. But offensively, 31st, 24th, defensively, it's a well-rounded group that didn't say, "Hey, Jake, win it for us," because the highs are real high with Jake, but sometimes can be turnover prone a little bit. And all good, not super concerned. The dude went 0 for 4 last year. And then BYU goes 10-2 with them this year, so feeling pretty good.
I lied. I have one more question. What are we going to be saying about BYU's recruiting class when it comes down tomorrow?
It's a good question. I'm about to learn all about it coming up in about an hour as we get ready for our show tomorrow. But and honestly, I don't even dip into recruiting till literally the day before. So I don't know, dude.
Well, the other thing about it is, like, they're all high school kids, and we have no idea what any of them are going to turn out like, especially with the transfer portal now being, a much more of an established product. So it's going to be wild.
It is interesting. Like, I asked this today to Blaine, too, on the show. I said, what's the role of signing day now? Because it's more like there should be like a transfer portal signing day, and that's the big one, right? But BYU did play a lot of freshmen this year. For a 10-2 team, they played like 6 or 7 guys were kind of in the 2s, which I thought was pretty good. Jay Hill actually developed some real good depth there, especially on defense with Falatel Satuala at safety, and Tommy Prastis had a scoop and score. Jonathan Cabea was a guy that played a bunch of corner, and Trey Alexander offensively, Reiner Swanson, Hokai Hung, Sione Moa. So BYU did play a handful of freshmen that played, I would say, important backup roles on this team at times. So that's to say, you sign a BYU, you got a chance to play on a top 25 squad that you're gonna see some significant time in some big games.
Jeremy, I appreciate your time. I hope that next time we have a conversation, it's about Colorado versus BYU in a bowl game. I can't wait for that matchup if that's what we get.
That'd be fun. And how Shador and Travis didn't actually play in the game.
Then we can agree on that. Jeremy Jordan, BYU Insider, BYU Sports Nation. Thank you for your time, as always. A little red and blue conversation on the Sean O'Connell Show. All right. You've seen the highlight. It's a low light, actually. The dirty hit on Trevor Lawrence. I want to read for you the NFLPA's reprimand of Azeez Al-Shaair. Scathing language directed at a player who is now out for 3 games because of a suspension. We'll get to that on the other side. Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, part of the Broadway Media Sports Network. football, but it's a big picture situation here on the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700. 3-game suspension for a dirty hit in an NFL football game. Not just a minor dirty hit, a hit on a sliding, helpless quarterback that knocked him unconscious and out of the game. Trevor Lawrence was well into his surrendering slide. And Azeez Al-Shaair of the Houston Texans, textbook targeting, launched himself, forearm to the face mask, slammed the head to the turf, knocks Trevor Lawrence unconscious, and his body does the now well-known fencer's pose, which people are aware of mostly because of the Tua Tagovailoa situation. But you've seen knockouts if you're in the combat sports world like I am. It happens all the time. Your body goes rigid. Your arms assume a weirdly automatic defensive posture. That's what happened to Trevor Lawrence on a dirty hit. And it was unequivocally dirty. Azeez Al-Shaair's head coach is DeMeco Ryans, who obviously played the same position for the same team, and he was weirdly defensive about it and tried to place some of the blame on Trevor Lawrence. And there are plenty of situations in college football and in pro football where quarterbacks are starting to figure out that you can kind of fake like you're going to slide and use that as a juke because the defender has to ease up, right? You saw Patrick Mahomes do it a bunch of times. We've seen Caleb Williams do it a bunch of times. That's not what was happening with Trevor Lawrence. He was like nearly horizontal, almost sliding on his, like flat on his back on the turf. He had given himself up 2 yards before the hit actually landed on his head. So it's a dirty play all the way to the moon and back.
Yeah.
And Runyon, John Runyon, the NFL Vice President of Football Operations, offered this statement, which is as scathing a language as you can find from anyone in a league office to a player that is intended to be public. I'm sure there's lots of, edited language that happens behind closed doors, but usually the NFL kind of circles the wagons and does this thing where they kind of give the coach speak just harsh enough to where it might satisfy the critics, but they don't typically try to throw the players under the bus, because if they do, then the NFLPA is all up in arms and you've got a controversy and you've got issues and all that stuff. But this was the statement directed towards Azeez Al-Shaair, who's now going to be suspended for 3 games for dirty play. Your lack of sportsmanship and respect for the game of football and all those who play, coach, and enjoy watching it is troubling and does not reflect the core values of the NFL. Your continued disregard for NFL playing rules puts the health and safety of both you and your opponents in jeopardy and will not be tolerated. This is not a first offense. He has a reputation as a dirty player, a dirty hit, caused not just one fight but 2 fights on the field. And it was, it was a bad situation all around. 3 games is actually, I think, pretty light for this, because when somebody gets in trouble for something now in a digital world where we've got receipts everywhere, what's the natural thing that happens? What's the first thing that happens? You go back and you find all of the other instances that might prove that this is either a dirty player, or if you're trying to defend him, no, he's not a dirty player. Look, here he is helping Tom Brady up off the turf. Look, here he is easing up on a hit that could have been a dangerous hit. But with this guy, he's got multiple, multi-camera, all the different angles, almost got in a fight here, did get in a fight there, stomping on a guy here. The one where he was in a 49ers uniform and he was like choke slamming Tom Brady. I mean, you just go find the low light reel. It's the opposite of his highlight reel. It's all of the questionable plays. And this is one of those things that you actually do have to get out of football. Dirty players, the Vontaze Burficts of the world, need to be weeded out, because football is already dangerous enough. The visceral reaction people have, particularly to unconsciousness and the rigid posture of people who are unconscious, has already led to rule changes that protect offensive players, I think, too much. And when you have somebody who's aggravating that and stirring up the pot that has been pretty settled recently, right? This is not 5 years ago where everyone was talking about CTE constantly.
Right.
Now this gets back into the discussion, especially when it's a dirty hit. If it's just an accidental, there's nothing you can do about that, then people just shrug their shoulders. When it's something where it was very clearly deliberate and is very clearly dirty, now you have to fire up the sympathy machine again and the hand-wringing machine and the anxiety machine in the NFL about, like, hey, is this going to be worth it? Is a guy like Trevor Lawrence jeopardizing his long-term health when he's out there against people who are legitimately trying to hurt him? Not doing this in the spirit of sportsmanship or in the spirit of competition, but that was a dirty play. And, of course, the statement says it jeopardizes the safety of your opponents and you. That's correct, because when you're a linebacker who's going to do this to a young quarterback, you now have every offensive lineman in the league who's going to be coming for you and is going to be trying to take out your knees and is going to be trying to hurt you because you're a dirty player, and they're trying to get this out of the game. We're going to have Jeff Schwartz on the show in 20 minutes. Jeff was an offensive lineman for a decade in the NFL. Part of your job as an offensive lineman is to act as enforcer and protector for not just the quarterback, but for everyone, but especially for the quarterback. And if somebody does this, launches a hit on a defenseless quarterback who's well into his slide, it is now your obligation as an offensive lineman to go make that guy's life miserable on game day and the next time you see him and the next time you see him and the next time you see him.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember this same kind of situation happening last year with Kareem Jackson. Not like dirty hits, but it was pretty little dirty hits. Like Josh Dobbs hit last year, got him his last suspension. I think George Payton had enough of that, and obviously they released him. But we saw a similar situation last year with Kareem Jackson, and this year we're seeing it again. And it was obviously Evan Ingram right there too. Was actually pretty cool because he bodied him basically.
So the idea that a 3-game suspension is the appropriate punishment, I think, is actually up for debate, because that puts you all the way to week 17. He's eligible to come back and play. I think they got Baltimore in week 17. But I just pushed play. I'm looking at it right now. Like, he's a dirty player. There's 10 different examples of him being a dirty player on an NFL football field.
Yeah, and Kareem Jackson was suspended for 6 games last year for the same thing, basically.
Hitting guys out of bounds. This one is on Caleb Williams. He likes to hunt quarterbacks. He likes to hunt young quarterbacks, especially throwing punches on guys. I am not a wilting flower when it comes to physicality or even, the borderline stuff in contact sports. These are grown men playing grown men's games. When you're trying to do things that can hurt people, or you're pretty obviously aiming to hurt them, aiming to take them out of the game, looking for the stretcher hit, it jeopardizes football at large. It jeopardizes football in general. And I know the NFL, too big to fail. It's not going anywhere. But it jeopardizes football as we know it. And you've already stripped away so many of the things that allow the game to be fair for defensive players. You got to get these guys out.
Yeah.
There's only a few of them. There really are. There's not a lot of dirty players in the NFL. There's not a lot of dirty players in the NBA. There's not a lot of guys who are actually dirty players who have any kind of interest in compromising somebody else's ability to stay in the game, to provide for their families. There's a certain fraternity that exists, and you get to know that when you're around NFL players and you hear the way that they talk, and they really kind of buy into the collective bargaining sort of situation. Yes, the rivalries are there, and yeah, there's guys on other teams that they hate, but it's super, super rare for people to actually be trying to hurt one another. And I'm watching very easily, very readily available, multiple plays just from this year and several from previous years where Azeez Al-Shaair is obviously a dirty player.
Yeah.
3 games is not enough.
No. And this is the stretch, too, of Houston's schedule where they play 3 games in 10 days, too. which is kind of nuts.
Well, good that he's gone, I guess.
I
But
think.
that means you have a 10-day suspension.
Mm-hmm.
You're not sitting and stewing on it and, on the couch away from your teammates. It's just, I don't know. I don't think this is enough of a punishment for what is very clearly a pattern of bad behavior. And we'll get Jeff Schwartz's thoughts on it when he joins us here in just a little bit. Still awaiting an announcement by Utah football on Kyle Whittingham's future, on the offensive coordinator situation. We know that Ben Arbuckle is out. He's headed to the University of Oklahoma. My assumption is that John Mateer, the former Washington State quarterback, I keep saying former. I'm assuming too much when I say former. The Washington State quarterback, who I believe will soon be the former Washington State quarterback. I think that means he's probably following to Oklahoma, but we'll see. And we hold our breath and we wait to see what happens with two very, very important coaching decisions with Utah football. But what I have been able to gather is that it seems like there are two names that have emerged as the most likely candidates. One of them is Mac Leftwich from Texas State University. The other, Brennan Marion from UNLV. We're going to compare their offensive numbers from this past season, and you're going to help me decide which one would be a better fit at the University of Utah. You're listening to the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM, part of the Broadway Media Sports Network. Sean O'Connell Show here on ESPN 700. As I talked about before, and I put a poll up, Buckle is no longer an option. He's going to Oklahoma, the Washington State offensive coordinator who runs a power raid offense, as that's the way that he describes it at least. It's an air raid. It's a bunch of air raid concepts with smash mouth football incorporated. It's like everyone's dream of a balanced offense, right? Easier to execute against the schedule that Washington State faced this year than one that you're going to consistently have in Big 12 play, in Big 10 play, and in Ben Arbuckle's case now in SEC play. But with the right amount of talent, which of course you can get at a place like Oklahoma, I anticipate that 29-year-old offensive coordinator is going to continue to have success. There's also the question of whether or not John Mateer is going to go to Oklahoma with Ben Arbuckle, and if he does, what does that mean for Arnold, the current Oklahoma quarterback, who was a quality player?
Yeah, he's had a really good year this year.
I mean, is there a quarterback battle, or does – I think the more likely outcome is Jackson Arnold reads the writing on the wall and says, well, this guy's bringing his own dude with him. I'm not going to win that battle. I'm off to Ole Miss.
Right.
I'm off to, wherever, Ohio State.
Yeah,
Whatever it is.
Dart's leaving and Howard's leaving, right? They're both seniors.
So we'll see what happens there. But the more important question for all the fans here is, what about the University of Utah? If the number one choice, and that was the fan number one choice, I actually don't believe that he was the best fit necessarily from a stylistic standpoint. If Kyle Whittingham is staying, that's a big ask for him to air the ball out that much. And he was not running an offense. Arbuckle was not running an offense at Washington State that was truly an air raid, but it was a lot more throwing the ball down the field than we're used to seeing, which might be what Kyle Whittingham wants, might be what Utah fans want. Brennan Marion or Mac Leftwich from Texas State. I wanted to look at the numbers on these guys just to give you a sense of what they were able to produce. Again, level of competition different, but neither of these teams were super over-talented in comparison to the rest of their conference. Rushing yards gained by Texas State's offense. 2,677 rushing yards this season. They averaged 208 yards on the ground per game. They scored 25 touchdowns on the ground. The Bobcats of Texas State. Which one is it? Are they Wildcats or Bobcats?
That's a good question. Let me look.
I should know this. Yeah, Bobcats.
Yeah, Bobcats.
All right.
Look at us go.
Look at us. Offensive numbers in the passing categories. 30 touchdowns, 3,186 yards, 8 yards per attempt, 265 yards per game. Most of that executed by a quarterback who does not have eligibility left, so you can't bring a quarterback with Mac Leftwich. They finished 7-5 on the season, 5-3 in conference play, so it didn't translate as directly to massive team success at Texas State as you would like to have seen. You can blame the defensive numbers for some of that. UNLV's 2024 offensive stats under Brennan Marion. Points per game, this is a sexy, sexy number in college football. UNLV, of course, in a conference that fans here have at least some familiarity with, scored 38.67 points per game.
Woo!
Almost 39 points per game for the UNLV Rebels. That is a beautiful number. Rushing yards, 3,343 on the ground for UNLV. 27 touchdowns, 5.6 yards per attempt, 254 yards per game on the ground for UNLV. Passing, 2159, 23 touchdowns, attempt. This is more of a Kyle Whittingham balance in the offensive side of things. They had dual threat quarterbacks down there, contributed to the run game. And obviously, we're very, very committed to running the ball. 262 passing attempts on the year, 547 rushing attempts on the year for the UNLV offense. Stylistically, if you're talking about a consistent offensive identity, more like what we have grown accustomed to at the University of Utah over the last 20 years, Brennan Marion is a guy that is a younger, hotter, more on the rise version of what you expect from Utah football. As I give you those numbers, though, and you say, oh, yeah, well, Brennan Marion fits the philosophy better. What's the definition of insanity? You do the same thing over and over, and you expect a different result. Utah football, as a run-first team, plays well to the personnel that you've already got on the roster because you don't have an answer at quarterback right now. I think you have some talent at the wide receiver position. I think you have some talent at the tight end position. You actually probably are deeper at those positions than you are at running back right now, which is a problem for Utah football. That's not how it's supposed to be up on the hill. So with no real answer at running back and no real answer at quarterback, now is the perfect time to depart from the norm, to take not a left turn, not a U-turn, but to just ease onto the off-ramp from this old way of doing things for Utah football. You're still looking for balance. You're still looking for an opportunity to recruit the same type of player so you don't have to completely alter your personnel philosophy. But Mac Leftwich still has a balanced offense. And Mac Leftwich has a closer ratio, a more balanced ratio in attempts, the rushing attempts, and the passing attempts. In this case, 90 more rushing attempts on the year than passing attempts. In the UNLV case, just to refresh your memory, you doubled the amount of run plays this year as you called pass plays. That is a significant difference. 262 attempts in the passing game by UNLV, 547 run plays. You more than doubled the number of run plays over pass plays. That is, again, comfortable, familiar, something that you could see Utah football getting behind. But the timing is right to emerge into a more balanced way of doing things. And I think Brandon Marion, he was the guy that I put at the very top of my list when I first made the list. Now that we have the full season of sample size, as opposed to, I think it was 7 weeks in, now that I look at this, I say, you know what? I think I want to see Mac Leftwich coordinating the Utah offense next year.
Yeah, and they just flipped Ficklin yesterday.
Bird Ficklin is coming to Utah. Yeah. He's going to sign that national letter of intent and whatever the NIL deal is tomorrow. And he was previously going to go play for Mac Leftwich. So
exactly.
I think that might matter here. I think that might have something to do with the decision being made.
Yeah, and the other thing too is Daniel Bray got flipped yesterday as well from SMU. And that's one running back down, but you still have to get some more depth at running back.
You got to get someone out of the transfer portal. I love freshman running backs because that's one of the positions you can plug and play. Mm-hmm. But you've got to get somebody with a little bit more experience. You have to get somebody whose body is a little more established, who's already grown into themselves a little bit, to be your starting running back next year. No disrespect to Eddie was on the roster, but Jalen Glover already announced his intentions to go into the transfer portal. He gone. All right, you're not going to court him back the way you did Mekhi Bernard. There's been enough disagreement between him and the coaching staff that you're not going to see a reconciliation there, I don't think. I like Mike Mitchell. Maybe a healthy version of Mike Mitchell is better and emerges as like a bell cow back, but there's way too much uncertainty with the running back position right now to be bringing in a guy who's even with a running quarterback, even with a dual threat quarterback, who's going to call twice as many run plays as pass plays. But if you end up with Brendan Marion, I'm still happy. I just think Mac Leftwich might be the better option here. All right, want to remind everybody that on Thursday, this coming Thursday, Sean O'Connell Show is going to be at PostNet in Draper. So I'd like to see you guys stop by. They're having a customer appreciation party. We're going to have gift bags, holiday treats, great deals on all these items, especially the custom Christmas cards. You've heard the commercial running. Now's the time to get those Christmas cards, make them fully custom. They'll print them, and they'll send them for you. Come out and see us Thursday, 11 to 2, PostNet, 138 East, 123rd South, down there in Draper at PostNet. All right, Jeff Schwartz joins me on the other side, a longtime NFL veteran, college football insider, and his alma mater, the Oregon Ducks, going to be number 1 in the college football playoff ranking again. They're on their way to a Big Ten championship game. We'll talk about all of it in 3 minutes on the Sean O'Connell Show. ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, part of the Broadway Media Sports Network. anyway. What's that? His third pick of the year, Cody Barton's?
Yeah, I think so.
He's been active, man. He's having a great year. His NFL career path has actually mirrored his career path with the University of Utah.
Because he went from Seattle to Washington to Denver, I think.
He was like okay when he started things out, and now I mean he's wearing the green dot. He's calling the plays for that Denver defense, who has a former Duck quarterbacking the offense. He had one of the beautiful throws of the season last night on Monday Night Football. Victory for the Denver Broncos. We welcome another Oregon Duck, a former Oregon Duck, Jeff Schwartz, a regular guest here on Tuesdays to talk NFL and college football. Jeff Schwartz, how are you?
I am good. I just sent you a text with a video.
I watched it.
And I know it's like getting ahead of ourselves to talk about like things that might happen at the end of middle of January, but I'm hopeful this is the year, buddy, that we can get it done because it feels like it is. It feels like it is.
I don't know if this is a year that Oregon wins a national championship, but I will say this. Dan Lanning has a magical ability to mold his taste in movies, which is excellent as far as we're learning, with motivational tactics for his team. We saw that with the Gladiator, Are You Not Entertained thing, and the thumbs down thing, and now this video that you just sent me was an excerpt from the Quentin Tarantino version of Inglourious Bastards, which is another great movie, and he knows how to motivate these young guys.
He certainly does. But movie, by the way, I took my kids to see Wicked. I think your daughters would like it too. My daughter loved it.
Really?
Long movie. It's long, but they enjoyed it. Yeah,
I have not taken. My wife has taken my two older daughters to movies, to two different movies. My mom's taken them to a movie. I have yet to take my daughters to a movie.
Do they sit still?
The older one does. The younger one is like she's 3, so she's like just now I think.
Oh yeah, she can't go this yet, but your older daughter certainly can. Okay. Absolutely.
All right. Well, maybe that's something we'll do over the holiday break. All right. Another college football playoff ranking is going to come out tonight. Your Ducks are going to be number 1, as they should be. What are the other first-round buys going to look like?
Notre Dame will be for certain. And then I think you look at the loser of the Big Ten championship game will have a. You mean buy? Is it buy or first round?
The first round buy, the bye weeks.
Okay. So Big Ten championship, SEC champion, probably. Arizona State, Clemson, both. I think Arizona State will be ranked higher than them. Than Clemson will, right? So they would get the bye.
See,
if SMU wins, I think SMU will be ahead of Arizona State, and they will get the bye.
I think, though, Clemson would be given more credit than Arizona State, especially for winning, because they would then have the resume win of a top 10 SMU team, and I think that when the final rankings came out, they might leapfrog, but we'll see.
So it's sort of what I gather will happen, and then I think we'll have home games will be loser of Big Ten championship, loser of SEC. I'll tell you what though, if Georgia loses, I don't think they're going to get a home playoff game. So maybe not them. Ohio State's a question if they get a home playoff game. I'm not certain. Indiana probably does not. Does that cover everyone? SEC champion. I think that covers everyone for home playoff games.
All right. We'll see how it plays out tonight when the rankings come out. In a bigger picture, or a smaller picture question, bigger picture for folks here in Salt Lake City, how important is the timing of an announcement on Kyle Whittingham's future and whoever the offensive coordinator is? You got a signing day tomorrow. And it seems like Utah's going to do okay despite the bad year. They've been flipping a couple of players. There's some good announcements that have come down, but everyone is still kind of scratching their heads and wondering when we're going to get confirmation that Kyle Whittingham is either coming back or he's moving on. You need to hire an offensive coordinator because the guy who took over the play calling duties is clearly not going to be the one long term. So How important is timing on these announcements in your mind?
This is where the signing day being so quickly after the season, I think, really hurts these decisions, right, Sean? Because I think you ideally would love to give Kyle Whittingham the opportunity to make this decision well before signing day, right? And now because of signing day, I sort of think you have to make it almost immediately because, these recruits, if he leaves, which is certainly, I think possible, he retires, the kids automatically get released from their NILs, I believe, right? Like, and it's free season on transfer portal. Like, I feel like you got to do this now. And transfer portal, by the way, is happening. We see it every day, right? X player is in the portal, this player's in the portal, that player's in the portal. Don't you have to give the recruits a little bit of a heads up if you're staying or going? He might be telling them he's staying. I mean, obviously, I think that's what he's saying. But don't you have to know like this week, like immediately before signing day?
I mean, I was expecting yesterday evening we'd get some clarity, and now I'm expecting sometime today we'll get some clarity. And I guess the only thing for me on the offensive coordinator, I think that's as important, right? Because if Kyle Whittingham stays, you know what you've got. If Morgan Scalley's going to be the guy, it's still not going to be drastically different than what Kyle Whittingham does, right? So if you're a recruit and you want to play for Kyle Whittingham, you probably also want to play for Morgan Scalley. He's the lead recruiter anyway. He's the number one recruiter for this Utah team. He's the reason you're probably coming here in the first place. And Kyle Whittingham and his consistency, that's a bonus for you. So
right.
I don't think that sways decisions very significantly. The offensive coordinator hire is a more interesting one for me. They were zeroing in on Arbuckle, but as soon as Oklahoma entered that chat, I was like, that's going to be tough to sway somebody away from the Sooners. And I think that changed the quarterback room and all that situation. UNLV's offensive coordinator Brendan Marion is one of the candidates, and they do have a game on Friday. Would potentially, if he's the plan, if he's going to be the hire, would they wait to announce so that he can finish things out at least in the conference championship game? Because you're doing UNLV a big favor there. You're not doing your own program a favor, though.
Unless recruits know this already, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess they would maybe know that, but then spilling the beans, you'd have to hope that they don't say anything, right? The next couple of days. Would Mary? I guess that's a huge upgrade, right, from UNLV to Utah. So I think this would be something he'd want to do. A very interesting offense they have at UNLV too. Kind of, it sort of threads the needle, I think, with what it feels like Kyle Whittingham would like in an offense, but sort of modern, right, Sean? Where it's still running the football. You're in shotgun. You got some creative designs, and you sort of have that explosive pass play options, right? It's not like a true spread offense, or it's not an under center run the ball offense. Sort of in the middle of those, right? So it does feel like a good fit for what the program wants to be offensively. Yeah, look, I think that you have to let the players know, especially before the portal opens up, right? I mean, we talked about this last week, and Spencer Fano needs to know what the offense is going to look like before. And we've discussed him staying, but I feel like you should let him know. So it does feel like the decision has to happen now, and I think out of courtesy, you're right, for UNLV this weekend. I guess it's Friday night up in Boise, Idaho. You would like to sort of not let it be known till after the game, but it's one of those things where, like, in the middle of the third quarter, we get a tweet from Pete Thamel, like, UNLV OC taking Utah job after the game, one of those things. So it does feel like that's certainly possible at some point on Friday night. If not him, who else is on the list? Is there a list circulating?
The other name that I'm hearing, and I think one that might be my favorite on the list now, even though I've been campaigning pretty hard for Marion for several weeks, Mac Leftwich at Texas State. And I don't know how much attention you pay to the tea leaves on these types of things, but yesterday, Bird Ficklin, who's a 3-star quarterback who was committed to Texas State, flipped his commitment to Utah.
Yeah.
Which, could be a coincidence. It would be a strong coincidence. I don't know. He's a Muskogee, Oklahoma kid. I know they do recruit Oklahoma, but it feels like that's a guy who heard that the man he thought he was going to go play for is now going to be at a new school. So how much attention do you pay to that?
Give me those two names again. Fantastic names. So let me hear those again.
Bird Ficklin?
This feels like a good football name.
His real name's Jamarian, but he goes by Bird. And it's not regular Bird, it's BYRD.
I did see that news, and I think the tea leaves are strong on that one, right, Sean? I mean, look, been in this business a while now. There are not many coincidences, right, when it comes to these things. And it does feel like this is exactly what you think it's going to be. So I'm kind of curious to see if this is a follow through on that. Look, I'm a huge fan of young, sort of open-minded, aggressive offensive coordinator hires. I look, you're going to lose them in 2 years if they're good, but for those 2 years, you revamp your offense. You get us in a position where I really think it sets your program up for just more success when you have a coach like that over the years. So I'm always for that. If Texas State's coach, Brendan Marion to me is same boat, sort of young, aggressive, cool designs, like stuff recruits want to play in, which is important, right, Sean? You want to, when you're recruiting portal players and you're recruiting other players, hey guys, like look at our offense. It's a fun offense to play in. Those things I think all matter to me.
There is some conversation, and I'm trying to figure out how much credence there is to this, that, like maybe somebody wants to come coach with Morgan Scalley but are less willing to go be, quote-unquote, shackled by Kyle Whittingham's tendencies as a head coach, because he does have a less than favorable reputation on how much he controls his offensive coordinator's creativity. How much do you think that plays into this search, especially if we're talking about the two guys that we've mentioned? Because, I mean, your salary's at least going to double, probably more than triple, and you're going from a Group of 5 school to a Power 5 school or a Power 4 school.
I mean, I think Kyle Whittingham, if you hire someone like that, aren't you basically saying, hey, we're hiring you to do your offense?
Yes, I think that, and I think that's always like, the best intentions are always laid out. And then there is the thing. Andy Ludwig has been the only guy, at least in my belief, that he really did take his hands off and just say, all right, do your thing, And then I think it got to be, when it wasn't working well this year, that there was more input and there was more control and there was more whatever. And you're the head coach. You're allowed to do that. And these are all just my theories and my hypotheses on that situation. But I really do believe that the only guy that's really been given the keys to the offensive kingdom has been Andy Ludwig. I don't know if you do that for a guy who's in his early 30s on his second offensive coordinator job.
Well, I think you have to. Otherwise, you're not going to get the guys you want. And it does feel like it's time to do something different. And different is, I mean, if you're going to hire someone like the two guys you mentioned, you're hiring them to do different things. If you want to hire a pro style guy, go find a pro style guy. But it feels like you're hiring these guys specifically to revamp the offense and make it in the image of what they do best. Now, of course, you can still keep some of the principles of what Kyle Whittingham wants to do with being aggressive and running the football and play action pass. And you can still have a physical offense, even though it's out of shotgun, Sean. You don't have to be a soft offense. You can still have a downhill running game, but it does feel like if you bring in one of those guys, I mean, I would love if they just were able to run their own offense.
I think that's the hope. Jeff Schwartz, my guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking about the Utah offensive coordinator situation, the Utah coaching situation. It is interesting. We're seeing even like BYU, right? We pay attention closely to what's going on with BYU. BYU's had like 4 guys announce that they're heading into the transfer portal, which is twice as many that Utah's had announced after an awful year for the Utes, and a year that you would assume that a lot of guys are just going to flee. Those announcements haven't come. I'm not saying that they won't, but I wonder if that's an indication that maybe there's more clarity and more transparency inside the building, so folks are waiting, the players are waiting to see what happens first.
I think it's impossible to really understand the motivations for kids transferring at the times they do, Sean. I don't think it's a uniform thing. But I do think if your intuition is they're sort of waiting for Kyle Whittingham to make an announcement, I do think that that's probably accurate, right? Like there's some players, it doesn't matter if you go in the portal today or tomorrow, right? I think it's fair to say that players are probably waiting to hear from coach on that, but win, lose, or draw, I mean, players are going to transfer, man. There's no rhyme or reason sometimes. I mean, the rhyme or reason is obviously they want to play more, but the fact is, it doesn't. There are players that are on playoff teams right now that are transferring, which is insane to me. But the portal opens now and closes in early January. You have to get on someone's roster immediately. So that's why players are leaving at the moment, which again seems to leave a playoff team seems wild to me. But I get it. If you're not playing, you want to go somewhere, you have to put your name in now.
The coaching carousel is spinning, not just with these coordinators, but head coaching jobs are already open. I think there's more that are going to open up, obviously, by the time the season ends.
Yeah.
What's going to be the albatross job? What's going to be the big one that opens up? Is Ryan Day out at Ohio State, you think?
I think I should apply for the Charlotte job. I think it's open application. Just
why don't you
send my name
apply
in there.
to be offensive coordinator at the University of Utah? You can move into the house next door. We can be best friends.
I don't think you can handle living next to Meredith. The Christmas tree on the side of the road that would not go over well. I think with the neighbors on the day of Christmas, we have to figure. By the way, we have to figure out if we're going to do the Christmas tree before we leave for Utah this year or after. So we can have a Christmas tree on the side of the road on December 19th, which, buddy,
people are going to be like, "What's wrong with these?"
We're going to be not going to. Look, if I could work 7 to 6. And still see all my kids' sporting events, I would coach. But it feels like that's an impossible thing to actually do.
Yeah, you're
like the one positive of our radio show ending is now I get to there's no conflicts now. I get to watch my kids play all their sports. It's my favorite thing to do in the world. I'm not ever giving that up again. So that's it. So if I could coach from those hours, I think I would do it.
I don't think that's going to work, pal.
That feels impossible to do, and so therefore I'm not going to do it. And no recruiting. So that's also, I don't even recruit on NCAA. I'm not recruiting. I'm too good for it, so I'm not going to do it. But the domino coaching position, interesting. So look, when you fire a coach, we talk about this all the time, you have to hire someone who's better. So if Ohio State fires Ryan Day, what are you doing? Who are you hiring? You're not getting Dan Lanning, who are you hiring? So Urban Meyer's not walking through that door. Who are you hiring? So I think it's an important question to ask here.
Jamie Chadwell.
How does that do anything?
No, it's a facetious answer.
Right. People saying, well, Vrabel. I'm like, okay, does that really make you any different? I mean, Ryan Day, this is the first, I heard this from Ari Wasserman on 3. It's true. This is Ryan's first loss of his coaching career that he wasn't supposed to lose. Like every other loss, you're like, okay, you lost to Oregon by 1. Yeah. You lost to Michigan team who won a championship, went to a playoff 3 straight years. You lost to Georgia by a point in a playoff game. Okay, those are losses that are acceptable, right? This past weekend was his first loss in 6 years that was sort of unacceptable, right? Where you lost to a team that was far inferior to you. So, what are you going to do? You're going to fire a coach because look, Jim Harbaugh lost to Ohio State many, many years in a row, and they stuck with him. I'm not saying it's going to happen again where you stick with a coach and you win a championship, but what is the plan here?
Kenny Dillingham.
I'd be down for that. I mean, I would be bummed for Arizona State, but yes, I mean, Kenny Dillingham is fantastic. I do think they win this weekend, by the way. I root for Kenny all the time. That's an interesting answer. Ohio State fans probably won't like that. There's this whole thing floating around where if you hire an Ohio man, you have a better record than if you hire someone who's not from Ohio, which is just the silliest thing of all time. But nonetheless, that'd be a good hire, actually. I haven't thought about that one.
Here's the thing. I don't know Kenny Dillingham well enough, but you would have to, and Ohio State presumably could and would, but you would have to pay him 3 times at Ohio State what he's making at Arizona State because that's his alma mater. He grew up there. He loves that place. That's home for him.
So he's not leaving.
To ask someone to leave that situation, you have to make it worth their while. And I guess Ohio State might be willing to do that. I don't know.
I know he's not going anywhere, but that is a fun name to talk about when it comes to this job. But USC thought they were gonna basically have fire Clay Helton and hire Lincoln Riley was going to fix all their problems. Does it fix any of their problems, Sean? No. Fire coach doesn't always fix your problems. So I'm not certain that that's going to change much of their trajectory of getting rid of Ryan Day.
Okay, I know I have to let you go soon, but I wanted to ask you an NFL question.
Yeah.
Azeez Al-Shaair is a dirty-ish player, and he just went at the head of a sliding quarterback. You're an offensive lineman in that situation. And look, his teammates came to his defense, right? Twice. They tried to fight him twice. How do you handle that?
You fight him. That's how you do it. You fight. He said in his apology letter, and that was actually a pretty sincere apology. I don't think he meant to hurt him, but he tends to have some of those dirty plays in his career. He said, like, yeah, I get why you fought me. That's what he said. It's like, yeah, I get it. Fight. Yeah, you have a fight. They have to fix how they enforce these, in my opinion, because they give they give offsetting personal fouls, Sean, and so the Jaguars got no yardage off of that. Yeah. When the answer is you give the 15 yards to Jacksonville for the hit, and then you do the offsetting penalties. Because like, how do you not penalize basically the Titans for that? I mean, the guy got ejected from the game.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, we talked about this with all the fights on Rivalry Weekend. There's certain things where, right or wrong, you're obligated to fight. If someone tries to, like, disrespect your home field, it becomes about you in your manhood. Right? You have to go do something. You have to. You're not allowed to just watch it happen. And this even more so. When somebody lays a dirty hit on your sliding, helpless quarterback and knocks him unconscious, you have to fight him.
Oh, absolutely. I wish Ohio State would have shown more fight, like when the flag wasn't being planted on their field. But I get why they had to do that. The pepper spray thing is wild to me. Like, it's not that bad.
It's such an escalation.
Come on, cops. It's college kids being a little aggressive. We have to start pepper spraying people.
Every football fight in the history of the world has fizzled out after like 45 seconds, and they started to pepper spray people instead. Crazy.
It's by the way, before we leave, I'm upstairs in my office, and my daughter just got home from school, and she's on her iPad texting me to order her sushi. I don't know who she thinks she is.
You know what?
But it's 3:30 on a Tuesday afternoon. She's not getting sushi right now.
Are you sure she's not getting it?
She and then she's like, she goes, and then I said I have no. I want to bring to lunch. She wants to bring sushi. She wants to bring sushi to lunch tomorrow. Is what she's telling me.
Dude, I went to war with my 3-year-old this morning because she wanted me to make her macaroni and cheese for breakfast after I'd already made her breakfast. It's not cool.
On the weekends, it's probably not a fight I'm going to have. I'll just be like, whatever, kids. You make your own macaroni. I'm at the age they get to make their own macaroni. But I'm not ordering her sushi for school tomorrow. Get out of here.
I kind of want you to. I kind of want you to. All right.
She's 8, Sean. I'm not ordering her sushi. Dude. She's already spoiled enough, okay?
You know what?
She's not getting sushi for lunch.
She is a chip off the old block.
Well, that's true as well, so I totally get that. All right, buddy. I'll talk to you next week.
All right. That's Jeff Schwartz, friend of the program, my longtime co-host on Pac-12 Radio. Now he joins me every week to talk NFL and college football here. We have a college football playoff rankings coming out again today. Jeff's Oregon Ducks will be right at the top of that list. And we didn't get to talk about it there because I don't manage my time properly. But Bo Nix, the Oregon quarterback, he didn't even have his best game last night, but he made the necessary plays at the necessary times. He had one of the most beautiful passes of the year, not just for him, but thrown by any quarterback, 93-yard touchdown. I mean, Bo Nix, you hear the way that his coach and his teammates talk about him. That guy's going to be the starter in Denver for a long time.
I'm all for it. And when I saw that throw, I'm like, please catch it. And I catch it and I stand up. I'm like, yeah!
I mean, that throw, to be fair, it ended up being one of the most beautiful throws of the year. It was a dangerous throw. There were 3 Browns right there.
Yeah.
And
it was like a cover 2.
He put it in exactly the right spot, and thankfully it was caught. But it could have gone the other way, and we would have been questioning what the bleep he was doing.
Yep.
It didn't work out that way, though. So Great play for him. Want to remind everyone, now's the time to help Utah's homeless. Donate unwrapped gifts at Cole West in Centerville or at any Utah First Credit Union now through November 30th. Wait a second. November 30th is past, but you can still donate to the road home. Visit ESPN700sports.com for more details. Rocky Mountain Chevy dealers helping us out with this as well. So blankets, coats, shoes, hats, gloves. Drop off your donations at all the Rocky Mountain Chevy dealers. ESPN700sports.com for all the locations. Help out your fellow man this time of year. All right, back to the offensive coordinator discussion. What do you want? Tell me, 877-353-0700. Brendan Marion, Mac Leftwich, or something else for Utah football. It's the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 792.1 FM, part of the Broadway Media Sports Network. Show, the final show continues here on ESPN 109.21 FM. The hanging question about the Utah football program right now is twofold. Does Kyle Whittingham remain in position as head coach? And if so, or if not, who's the offensive play next year? Ben Arbuckle was part of the conversation for Utah up until yesterday evening when it was announced that he would be hired as the next coordinator at Oklahoma. John Mateer may or may not be going with him. He might not be going anywhere. I mean, I guess Washington State could just divert all of their NIL funds directly to Mateer in hopes to keep him around. He likes it up there. We'll see how it plays out. But now Utah's got to turn their attention elsewhere, and all of the information I've been able to gather is that it's coming down to a decision between Brendan Marion at UNLV and Mac Leftwich at Texas State. I put a poll question out there, which you would rather have as a Utah football fan, Marion, Leftwich, or other. 3.6% of the votes coming in on other, and Matt Wells' name has been floated out there. I don't know how realistic that is, although I did like Coach Wells as a head coach at Utah State. He's had some success as an offensive coordinator, obviously, and he knows what it's like. He knows the landscape of recruiting and everything else here in the state of Utah. I don't know what his relationship with Kyle Whittingham and Morgan Scalley are like. That matters a lot. You got to be able to fit into this coaching staff. Most of these guys have been around for a long time. This is a long-tenured staff. It's not just Kyle Whittingham who's been around for a long time. Everyone on this staff is in that position longer than is typical in college football. So you got to find a way to fit in. Hopefully your family gets along with everyone else's family, all that kind of stuff. That can be figured out later, though. You got to know what the performance is like on the field. Brendan Marion is currently receiving 47.7% of the votes. Mac Leftwich, 48.7% of the votes. So very similar to the poll I conducted where I asked you, what's in the best interest of Utah football? Kyle Whittingham staying or Kyle Whittingham moving on? This one is split very nearly down the middle with a few others splashed in there. Someone put in Norm Chow. I don't think that was a realistic answer. I don't think anyone actually wants Norm Chow. There was a really good point brought in by the Utah Fancast. Texas State didn't beat anyone of quality, whereas UNLV did. Utah's tried and true method for hiring coaches from the group of five level is to get guys who beat power conference teams. That was true for Urban Meyer and Rick Majerus, and they turned out all right. That's actually a really good point. What you have done with the riches or lack thereof that you have is very consequential in how we should evaluate you. UNLV has wins this year over Houston. All right, they weren't that good. Kansas, we saw what Kansas ended up being, and that was a road win for UNLV. Beat Kansas 23-20. That's a very talented team. They demolished Utah State. They beat up Oregon State. They lost a close battle to Boise State, one of their two losses of the year. Also fell 44-41 to Syracuse. But again, we're talking about the offensive output. And they scored 41 points on a Syracuse team. They scored at least 24 in a loss to Boise State. And, of course, UNLV has the rematch with Boise State coming up this week for a Mountain West Conference championship. UNLV has an opportunity to upset the apple cart in not only the conference but the college football playoff rankings. Boise State right now is the darling. They're the group of five darling of that committee, and if they can win their conference championship, as you've seen the projections, and we'll get another one tonight, it appears likely that Boise State would get a first-round bye as a group of five team in the first year of a college football playoff. That is a win, if there's ever been one, for a group of five program. But you got to get through UNLV again. I'm wondering if Brendan Marion has emerged as the lead candidate and how that would affect the announcement being made or not. How do you tell a team to stay focused, to dial in, to go beat Boise State? How do you tell that offense to go score the 40 points it's going to take, the 35 points it's going to take to beat Boise State 3 days after you told them, hey, your offensive coordinator is not going to be here next year? Because immediately it makes all of those guys start to question, all right, is he invested in the outcome of this game still? What about for me? What about my prospects? Do I get to follow him to the University of Utah? Is he just going to leave and not take any of us with him? Who else from this staff might be going if this coaching staff is falling apart? So that might have something to do with it. I could see that being a likely reason for relative quiet up on the Hill. But getting back to the point of the strength of record, the Texas State Bobcats did not finish 10-2 as UNLV did in the regular season. They finished 7-5, second in the Sun Belt West Division. And while they performed admirably against some some Power 4 competition, Arizona State only beat them by 3, and Arizona State is off to a Big 12 championship this weekend. This is a team that does not have the signature win, does not have the Power 4 win on the schedule. They've got wins over Lamar, UTSA, Troy, Arkansas State, Louisiana Monroe, Southern Miss, and South Alabama. Now, their offensive numbers, again, were great offensive numbers. And they were offensive numbers that were more balanced than what we saw from UNLV. UNLV is still capable of those explosive passing plays, but UNLV very much a run-first offense. They get the quarterback involved in the run game. That might be the real question for Utah moving forward. If Morgan Scalley and Kyle Whittingham are sitting down and being collaborative in this decision-making process, the conversation I could see very clearly revolving around, well, how much are we going to run the quarterback? Because we keep getting quarterbacks injured. We've had devastating 2 seasons with quarterback injury, and a lot of those injuries, well, the most significant one this year happened, the first downfall for Cam Rising happened on a quarterback run. On him, not a design quarterback run even.
No. But he got signed into water jugs too. But yeah, like you said, like Cam Rising twice, Braden Rose, Isaac Wilson, Sam Heward. Now we're down to Luke Vittori.
So maybe that's part of the conversation. All right, If we bring this guy in, he likes the quarterback run game. We're gonna have to tell him no more of that, or maybe that's just college football. You look at the great quarterbacks in the game right now. You look at the top quarterbacks in college football right now. You look at the top free agent quarterback we think is going to emerge. That's John Mateer kid. He's got 600-plus yards rushing for Washington State. You need a quarterback who's able to pull the ball down and run. Everyone that hurt you badly this year did so with his legs at the quarterback position. So I truly don't know. The conversations, they're in lockdown mode up there. Reliable information is hard to come by. But I think it is down to these 2 names. Now watch, it's going to be somebody, Dan Mullen's going to show up and just be like, ha-ha, it's me. I'm back, baby. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll finish the show with a little crosstalk with Spence Checketts. The drive is coming up. Want to remind everybody out there, we've got some topical trivia coming, a Lemon Shark Poke gift card, and a gift card to Farmer and Chemist for all the top quality CBD products down there in historic Midvale. You pick it up in store, you redeem it in store. So trivia and a little crosstalk with Spence next to finish out the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM, part of the Broadway Sports Media Network. All right, we just talked about this on the show, so I'm going to offer it to you as a trivia question. Lemon Shark Poke gift card, Farmer and Chemist gift card, 877-353-0700. All right? The UNLV offense, coordinated by Brennan Marion, called how many run plays? Executed how many run plays this season? I gave you the number, and it was significantly more run plays than pass plays run by UNLV this year. 877-353-0700. How many run plays were executed by UNLV football? How many attempts at rushing the ball on their way to 3,300 plus yards? Let me know, and we'll give you some gift cards on the Sean O'Connell Show. The Drive with Spence Checketts is up next. Spence Checketts is here in our Broadway studio, if you can believe that.
For the second time today.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. A little meeting.
A once-a-month programming meeting. Very productive today.
Yes.
Ready for teases, copious teases during the afternoon drive show today.
Okay.
How was your show?
Radio gold, as always.
I mean, it was a hypothetical. We all know the answer. What ran the bulk of the Sean O'Connell show today?
We jumped around a little bit. Talked about what I think has emerged as a two-name race for the offensive coordinator position at Utah now that Arbuckle is out of the running and headed off to Oklahoma. I asked the question of how you try to protect your roster and your culture in the new revenue sharing and NIL opportunities as you're about to sign a new class. These guys are not signing NLI. They're not just doing national letters of intent anymore, Spence. They're signing contracts with the team. So what language, what do you put in there to protect yourself as a coach, to protect your program, to protect your team culture? And I offered some choices on the Twitter poll, like, is there an injury clause in there? Is there some blockage of transfer in there? Are you doing performance-based compensation where you actually have to produce before you unlock the full potential, And most people think that transfer protection is the most important one.
At this point, it really is up to the institution, correct?
Yes.
Because there's no oversight. I wonder how creative you're able to get.
And how much is enforceable even if you put it in there?
Right. I've been on this now for a number of years on my show. I don't know how you feel about it. I just think the sooner that you allow, and there are plenty of very powerful, smart law firms that would love to take on the task of unionizing college athletes and collectively bargaining with the powers that be over college football. I don't know if that's the NCAA. At this point, it probably is for the moment, but the sooner football specifically, if we just hone in on that, the sooner that moves to a pro model, the sooner that we're going to start to have solutions that kind of limit the chaos as far as what we've seen over the past 3 years. Now, the good news is Utah football has, I'm not going to say remain untouched. They've lost players, really good players, and everybody's going to lose players, but it hasn't been catastrophic for the Utes, nor has it been catastrophic for BYU. I do think it's just a matter of time, though, until we see this pro model. And the sooner it could happen, I don't understand why there isn't more of a push just to make this go down. Because right now, if it's up to the institution, let's say Utah football, let's say Mark Harlan, University of Utah, they come up with a contract rider, a boilerplate rider they're going to have all their players sign. If Utah decides to put in the contract that you have to sign as a player that you're not allowed to transfer, the player's going to go find a school that doesn't have that
correct
in the contract. So that's what makes it sticky, and that's what makes it delicate, because you do want some sort of guarantee, and the guarantee would come in the form of a uniform contract that all college players have to sign. Yes, is there wiggle room? Of course, just like there is in the pros. How much of it is guaranteed? How much of it is based off of appearance? How much of it is based off of performance? How much of it limits your ability to simply bounce out the side door if you're not happy with your playing time? So it's an interesting dynamic to consider, but until there is one governing body with a commissioner like there is in pro football, and as long as it's left up to the institutions, I would be really curious to see what sort of contract riders in place from each specific college.
Yeah, it's interesting because right now the players have all the power, and the institutions would like to get that back. I can't imagine. How do you get – how many NFL players are there? 1,500 NFL players?
Ish, thereabouts.
How many how many college football, Division I, Power 4 college football players are there? You're now asking several thousand 17 to 25-year-olds to agree on the parameters. Collective bargaining is going to be very, very difficult, even if you choose the exact right leadership council and all that stuff. So, yeah, it's going to be real interesting because now that the players have seized the power in terms of, especially roster autonomy effectively, they're never going to want to give it back. If you have to collectively bargain and sign a pro contract, we know how cutthroat the NFL is. You think that Utah and BYU and USC and Ohio State are going to be like, you know what, you're actually not that good, but we like you. You're a nice kid, so we're going to give you 4 years in a free education, and you're going to get a salary too. No, they're going to be cutting 80% of the roster every year.
Well, and then you're going to have to deal with agents. You already do, in a way. A lot of them are uncles or family friends or whatever, but this is just the reality of where we're at. We can't complain about it anymore. It is the new normal, and until there are more guidelines in place, there's going to be more chaos. Let me ask you this. Noah Fifita, transfer portal.
Yes, please.
Yeah, right?
Absolutely.
Just announced about an hour ago, Noah Fifita's in the transfer portal. I just, the more I think about it, Sean, I don't think the answer under center is on the roster right now.
I feel very firmly that the answer is not on the roster right now.
Yeah.
The problem with Noah Fifita, he's got 1 year of eligibility, I think.
Is that what it is?
I believe.
Okay.
I suppose I could look it up with this computer that has the access to all of human knowledge in front of me.
Go ahead and Google that bad boy. But, I just saw that about an hour ago, it was announced that he's gone. And if you're Utah, I think you'd at least make a phone call.
How wild, by the way, that Noah Fifita decided to stay when his coach left for Washington, left for the greener pastures in Seattle. And Noah Fifita and Jacob Manu and Tetaro McMillan and all these guys decided to stay at the University of Arizona. And I was with them. I believed that they had something special going on there, and they had a bad season, just like Utah had a bad season.
Yeah.
So you just never know. Noah Fifita would be, I think, interesting. Now, there's culture questions with Noah Fifita. If you remember at Washington State, there were some issues. He got in a couple of fights with teammates, one that was very public. So he's accustomed to being treated a certain way. Is that the kind of player you want to bring in to play quarterback at the University of Utah? I'm not saying no. Miller Moss is also in the transfer portal. So if you're looking for a 1 year rental, there's going to be options. I don't know, with all the other questions surrounding Utah football, whether that is the direction they want to go.
Yeah, and ultimately, I guess maybe you're counting on another year of development from Isaac. Is Brandon going to be the guy from day one next year? Because we did see in spurts maybe he was a little bit more prepared to play this year than Isaac. But to me, transfer portal, 1 year rental, that seems to be the model that so many teams have. Dan Lanning. It's the model that so many teams have adopted. It seems to work well. So. I just wonder what the reaction of the fan base would be if they just if they just ran it back next year with that quarterback room, besides Cameron, obviously, who I just don't think is going to be back. Do you have any insight on that as of now?
Not at the moment. I do stand corrected, by the way. 2 more years of eligibility for Noah Fifita.
Okay.
So that changes the calculus a little bit in my mind.
Sign him up.
The Cam Rising thing, and then I'll get out of here and turn it over for your show. The Cam Rising thing, I want an answer now on Kyle Whittingham's future. I want an answer now on the offensive coordinator position. I don't want Cam Rising to make an announcement one way or another until after the rest of the quarterback room is as settled as it can be. Until they get commitments and names on the dotted line from high school recruits and December 9th in the transfer portal. You got to get somebody else in this building before Cam Rising announces his intentions one way or another.
The instant reaction I have is if you were a transfer or if you were a high school quarterback, wouldn't you want to know if Cam's going to be in that room before you signed?
You probably would.
Yeah.
But I would rather say we're not sure and hopefully be telling the truth than say, yeah, Cam's coming back, because then Noah Fifita is going to be like, well, no, if he's coming back, he's your starter.
Right.
And I don't want to have to battle for a job with my 1 or 2 years left.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. Only time will tell.
We'll find it out at some point.
Yes, we will.
Stay tuned for The Drive with Spence Checketts. By the way, the correct answer on our trivia question, how many rushing attempts for UNLV football? 547 as opposed to the passing game, which generated in the 260 attempt range. So, woo! Thanks for listening. Thanks to everyone who joined me on the show today. Thanks for all your interaction on Twitter at RealOC Sports. Stay tuned for The Drive. ESPN 792.1 FM, part of the Broadway Media Sports Network.